Alright, let's see if this works.
Think of it more like the little birds that eat the um, that pick the stuff out of crocodiles' teeth.
I believe that would
Hopefully
be
that
an
is what
example.
working. And, yeah. Apologies.
I, bel I believe that would be an example of a symbiote.
Mm,
Now should be working. And hopefully...
I tend to think of symbiotes as being kind of more um, absolute in their dependence on each other rather than it being mutual convenience. I may be wrong in that.
Okay. We've stopped trying the fancy things.
What? Yeah, Foxhound's barking up the right tree here, or Jaffying up the right tree.
Yeah.
Imagine a Goa'uld in every head, exactly as Rod didn't want. He would be so mad. It would be so worth it.
I'm not sure about that.
There would be peace and justice in the new Goa'uld Empire.
There wouldn't be. The Gwald constantly try and kill each other.
Yeah, that's just a minor detail. We can work it out in post.
Yay. Yeah, we managed to make it. There's now a new link up. Everyone, there's a new... We are now live again. Hello. Yeah, and hopefully I fix this, and hopefully it's not gone weird stream settings.
Where have you put this said link so that I can share it to the people who are stranded in YouTube chat?
It should have gone out on Twitch and on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and on Threads.
It does not appear to have gone out on Twitch. I shall see if I can hunt it down and be a good human person thing entity. I have the link. I have copied the link. I have dumped the link in chat. I am now leaving chat to fend for itself.
That is
because
always a bad thing to do to the poor chat, leaving it to fend for itself. But we are now working. Okay, so the queue is currently closed. I'm working through the questions.
Have you seen each chat?
Okay. Wayne's World of Science Tech. Vimy Ridge. Could you explain how it was broken? Big explosion.
If in doubt, use more explosives.
Application of huge amounts of high explosive. It was a very begrudging victory. It is a battle which lasted 4 days in April 1917. That tells you pretty much everything you need to know about it.
I am predicting a lot of artillery.
Well, let's put it this way. You have 8 field artillery brigades of the Canadian Corps, 2 heavy artillery groups, plus 4 British heavy artillery groups, and 9 field artillery brigades, 3 divisional artillery groups, and the artillery complement of 5th Division are all attached to the Canadian Corps. There are also 10 heavy artillery groups on the flanking 1st and 17th Corps are supporting it as well. And, you know, that just tells you you have problems here. You are applicating a huge amount of heavy artillery.
So we are reshaping the
It's I am trying to figure out the exact number of guns, because there are also other units as well which were attached and providing support. Basically, it was enough artillery, and you also had underground operations trying to lay mines and counter mining and all sorts of things. So I think there were roughly 13 mines laid, and it was just a colossal amount of high explosives, air operations, everything that could be chucked at it. Vimy is a combined operations World War One style, when you had the time to lay all the ground underneath. So it's a massive amount of firepower, a massive amount of... it's got tanks, it's got everything else there, and it's got a massive amount of pre-laid weaponry. So, yeah. Vimy Ridge is everything. Major landscape project. There was certainly something going on there. Oh, this skill's good. I have promised not to open this yet, but it's nicely chilled. It is very nicely chilled.
What's going to be the bad thing that happens if you do?
Well, I promise I'll open it till I run out of Iron Brew, so basically I haven't drunk this yet. I'm just being honourable. It's a fun time. It is a fun time. But yeah, for Vimy Ridge, for me to go into more detail than that, I'd probably want to get some books out and do a big proper video rather than answer a question. Sorry, Wayne. This is called Naval History. This channel. I do a bit about World War One, but usually when I'm doing something like that, I will call up. I know there's a couple of colleagues, and including Gareth the Brit, and go, just check this before I talk about this, because I'm going to be talking about the land warfare guys in World War One. Harold Gudgeon. In 1988, a 17,000-ton cruiser in the service of the Royal Navy. What would the armament be? Seawolf, Sea Dart, and everything else in between. If you're putting in that much, you're going to have probably Harpoon by that point. Probably... Honestly, it's going to have... If it's going to still stick with the 4.5... If it's going to be called a cruiser, they might even try the 6-inch gun project, because there was one around that time as well. So it might be getting 6-inch guns, which means it might also get some 3-inch guns. It's going to have close-in weapon systems, probably in 1988, actually probably Goalkeeper rather than Phalanx, because at that point Goalkeeper was considered better. And probably at least 2 spots and 4 helicopters. Requesting an add timing check. Okay.
What is a spot in this context?
A landing spot is you can have a flight deck which has a single spot, can land and recover 1 helicopter at a time. 2 spots, 2 helicopters can land and recover at a time. You could theoretically go for a quadruple spot, but at that point you're going for a very big flight deck.
What if you just got 2 very tiny helicopters?
Yeah. So you'd probably would go 4 helicopters and 2 spots. Add should be okay, according to everything I'm working with at the moment.
Question. Is there any modern service combatant that's currently being built without aviation facilities?
Not really. But
Okay.
most of them are built with single spot orientation. Very few are built with dual spot. And more should be. Yes. Right. Stafford Thompson, if the Trump class gets built based off the design, and let's call them the Defiant class then, being lead ship, what naming convention could follow for SO class, and what would you name them if you had the opportunity? I go for Civil War battles. Literally, if I wanted to make them uncancelable, I'd go for Civil War battles. Because, let's be honest, which Congress wants to cancel a Civil War battle?
Do you call it Bull Run or do you call it Manassas?
Oh, I'd have both, just to wind them up.
Which side won?
The North, and I'm pretty certain it would be the Battle of Manassas. Let me look it up. That's where.
But yeah, I'd go for
Remember,
battles
so
and
that's
admirals.
what-
Admirals are slightly more easy to cancel than battles, but they can be quite difficult as well if you pick the right ones.
Willis Lee.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
You've got to call it Willis Lee.
So it would be Battle of Bull Run. I have it swapped in my head.
Yeah.
Okay.
9681. If the Lexington class were built as an Americanized version of the Hood, will it be better? Will we be better or worse carrying conversion? They'd be okay. So if you basically take the armoring profile of Hood and you build that into Lexington class design, you adjust it for 16-inch guns and the American size of their barbettes and other things. Probably actually be slightly bigger across the beam and slightly longer. But that wouldn't be a bad thing, but that would be about it. So would it be better or worse carrier conversion? It'd be more complicated carrier conversion if they've had the armor built into them. But there again, that's life. So slightly more complicated maybe, but slightly bigger ship, so yeah, that's going to be fun. Montana 67, what if the G-class destroyer of 1944 was built?
You'd have some G-class destroyers. But they were... Weren't they similar-ish in idea to... Well, there's not much known about them. But they were supposed to be similar to the...
They improved weapons, weren't they?
Yeah.
They're improved weapons. Basically, we end up with a load of improved weapons. Weapon class were quite good, but you remember, weapon class were basically... Here's the joy of what you happen. In the Royal Navy's building destroyers, and they have the big ones, the big fleet destroyers, which are going tribals, battles, darings. They're getting bigger and bigger, and the yards which can get them built are getting slightly fewer and fewer. And then you've got the small destroyers, the Cs, the CHs, CAs, all those things, which they're churning out in every yard they can, and the lot can fit them. And you've got these some yards which, frankly, they can't build ships any faster than the small yards, but they can't fit the big yards. The big destroyers. And so to take advantage of them, they come with the intermediate destroyer. Okay? That's the idea, because they will build that. That's more efficient for them to build. And that's entirely what the weapon class and the gunner class are. So if World War II carries on, and you have, let's say, for some reason the nukes aren't dropped on Japan or something, and things carry on out there for a while, you will have a whole host of these things built. And what will they be used for? Well, probably, knowing the British, when war ends, the smaller destroyers will get sold off, and they'll keep the weapon class equivalents, intermediates, and the larger destroyers, because they can do more with them to adapt them. So if they are around, they are probably used to provide more conversions and more useful things for the Cold War.
I mean, it doesn't change anything, Knight, because the Lexingtons were under construction during the Washington Naval Treaty negotiations. I'm not understanding what that statement is supposed to communicate.
Yeah.
Instructions unclear. Port boot on head.
I think Sadoo's having fun with arguing about the Washington Naval Treaty. Basically, the thing is, again, you always have to remember the Lexington class are A. Hello, what's that? A, first generation, first generation battle cruisers that the Americans are building, because they haven't built battle cruisers before then. So it's their first generation. And B, they're being built for a scouting/economic warfare role, so they are far closer to the original Invincibles than they are to Hood in their designing. Even though Hood, as originally, is actually closer to them, because Hood was, in many ways, a reset thanks to good old Fisher and Renown and Repulse. The original Admiral design was far more closer to Invincibles than to Tiger. This is why when we're talking about it, when we talk about the battle crews and we talk about their density, as in how close they're getting to fast battleships, and people make Hood to describe Hood as a fast battleship, I sit there and go, no, because would you describe Tiger as a fast battleship? And if you say no, well, Tiger was a denser build than Hood, so Tiger has more claims to being a fast battleship than Hood does for her time period. And that's the fun thing. Thank you for the subscription, GB. Gender Ball. Why am I getting GB on one screen and Gender Ball for your name on the other screen? I have no idea, but thank you for the subscription. Oh. What if you built Hood like Tiger? She'd have come in displacing roughly 45,000 tons, not 42,000 tons.
Can she still be ignored at 45?
No, at 45, they would still they wouldn't be able to get rid of us, so they'd have to try and work out a way of writing it into the treaty. And that's
everybody gets one. Everybody gets 45,000.
Potentially. Potentially, that's when you end up with battle cruisers being 45,000 tons standard displacement, and everyone's allowed a certain number of battle cruisers, and battleships are a different standard displacement. So basically, you have, if you're building a ship which you've got 45,000 tons to build a certain number of ships which go, let's say, 29 knots and above, and the rest of your tonnage is for 28 knots and below ships. And that's the thing you end up with. You sort of go, okay, so if I have to build a ship which can do at least 29 knots, and then I can build some number that go 45,000 ton ships. And that's also going to affect your carrier design as well, but you'll leave that to one side. Mark Harness, did General MacArthur's patently erroneous assertions about a forward defence of the Philippines affect the British stance on defence of Singapore? Not really. Phillips. The problem for people sometimes consider what Phillips was listening to had conferred with MacArthur, but he also conferred with the American admiral, who now at the moment I cannot remember the name of. And basically, the Navy's plan was to withdraw back and sort of focus on the work for projection from Singapore. That's where they thought they'd end up projecting from, and this included the U.S. Navy. The problem for that, what I said, the problem you have with the Far East is realistically the A's and the B teams have mostly been sucked into North Africa and the European theatre for the British Empire. And the vast majority of the personnel you're dealing with in, I would say, staff command positions especially, not necessarily the units, the staff command positions, are C's and D teams. Thank you, Ryan. Thomas Hart. I know. Alec, Dan also reminded me as well. And that's the trouble. Phillips is actually a pretty good admiral. He might have argued with Henderson, he might have argued with a few people, but he's pretty decent. And I think some of the things that affect him are the way the cookie crumbles, but also it's a legacy of the treaty system, it's a legacy of a lot of discussions, and it's a legacy of the pre-war thinking on how you ran these things versus the wartime thinking. Because again, the whole kerfuffle over aircraft, there is no strike support available, so there's no air support available. Is what the RAF officers involved translated as. And so the Navy takes that as there's no fighters or strike aircraft available. Because in the Mediterranean, they've started differentiating, and the standard practice has become to differentiate between whether there are fighters available and whether there are strike aircraft available, or whether there's one or the other. And the sort of thing of you talk about you don't conflate the two, because the two are very different things. The Navy, in a nice way, battleships, do they really need strike support? Probably not. It's useful. They're not going to turn it down, but they're not so worried about having it. Whereas a destroyer force or a convoy would probably quite like strike support, wouldn't it? Whereas fighter support, a battleship would really like fighter support. A destroyer might go, well, in the nicest way, I'm going to be doing 33 knots. I'll take fighter support, but if you don't turn up, it don't turn up. I'm racing. I'm dodging and racing. And so there's the differential going on, and that's why you have to differentiate. But that's pre-war thinking was all about strike aircraft. Wartime thinking was going, okay, we've got differences here.
How much does 4C change if both ships can sustain 33, 34 knots?
Well, if they're that much further south, potentially the Japanese can't reach them.
Neat.
Because you have to remember, those aircraft were running out of fuel. They were very, very low on fuel. And they just about saw them and just about caught them. But, again, the thing is, if you have the entire force, if the force has been raised up that fast, if you have the fact that King George V's are on that much higher speed, the odds are King George V herself makes it to Battle of Denmark Strait. Which means you probably don't have a Prince of Wales in the same condition, but also if you had 2 KGVs and Hood at the Battle of Denmark Strait, that's going to be a very different battle. And you go back forward, because if they're all making 33-ish knots, then that changes the history quite dramatically.
Foxhound, are you coming out into the greater internet in Germany, or? Because usually those ads are going to be geolocated, and I can't think of any other countries that are.
Well, I've been sending people. I sent to people some German players of the bookshop video a lot earlier today after I finished a bookshop game after I finished it on Twitch earlier, which apparently people enjoyed. They were very nice Germans. What's the Triplets? What was Yonai's role as Navy Minister during doing Kona and Tojo cameras? I imagine part of it is saying, I told you so, told you for going to war against US and seeing how much trouble they're in. Pretty much it's trying to rein people in. Yonai, especially at the end, he's brought back in literally because he's the only one who can actually. It's a really weird scenario. Yonai is the minister who is both trusted by the government, trusted by the Emperor enough, and respected by the Navy enough, he can order them to surrender, and they'll surrender. And that was the first thing which gave me a clue that Yonai was someone I needed to look more deeper at. That Yonai, someone who had basically been out of active command for the war, hadn't been involved in those other active duties, was the person who was able to be trusted to come back and be an honest broker and respected intermediary on both sides. And then I started finding out the stories about him during the various incidents where people didn't go for Yonai. They made an ostentatiously, we are not touching you, Yonai. We're not going for you. And you then look at him and go, he's not a very rich man. He doesn't have this. He travels around by public transport and all sorts of things. And you then start to think, well, hang on, what is this? Who is this guy? And he is really, really powerful. He is Mitsumasa Yonai. If you want to make Leslie one of the admins and one of the flotilla leaders and people who wanders around the channel, really, really look a bit worried. You get him to start talking about Yonai and all the stuff he's found out about him. And pretty much, if things had gone a different way, Yonai probably has the power, sufficient capability. He could have ended up dictator instead of Tojo, and it would have been a very different Japan. Because he is one powerful personality.
Just because I'm seeing it in the chat, the history that I've read regarding the absolute implosion of the defense at the Philippines basically puts that down to MacArthur just locking up
Yeah,
and not having any lieutenants that and when I say lieutenants, I mean that not in the O2 rank sense, but in the
general
subordinate,
say.
immediate subordinate
Yeah,
sense. Yeah. Um, who either had the wherewithal or the chutzpah to just be like, yes, the general totally authorized you to enact his earlier plans,
yeah.
and this is not me looking at General MacArthur like, dude, get your stuff together so we can, go do our jobs. Uh,
Multipros, Singapore wasn't a logistical hub for the United States at that time, but it was planned to be able to made to be, and there was reasons for that. One of the things was suitable was the dry docks and the spacing for it. The U.S. had plans to utilize especially if the Philippines fell. Singapore was one of the places they could fall, or they had looked at to fall back on because Singapore has a massive amount of fuel, has a massive amount of logistical capacity, infrastructure capacity. You have to remember, Singapore is not being set up as a forward operating base. Singapore is supposed to be a theatre entry base, and the forward operating bases will be further forward. They would be places kind of like Weihai Wei and Hong Kong. So the idea is Singapore is set up to actually almost in many ways be the logistical hub for multiple nations coming together in the first place. And so that's the scenario. And yes, it is a supply line which does. Well, for the Americans, the idea was the supply line was if the Philippines fall, they come down to basically to Australia and come across the Pacific and up. Or the British supply line goes around Africa and across the Indian Ocean until the Mediterranean falls, and that's basically it. Again, it's not going to be easy. I'm not saying it's not a brilliant position, but there is no perfect position. But also, Singapore's a lot more closer. If you're fighting if you manage to keep the Japanese in the Philippines, and they're not getting to the Dutch East Indies, and they're not getting into Southeast Asia, and you're managing to hold them, Singapore is a lot closer than trying to do that battle and do that logistical support from either Australia or from Hawaii. So that's the thing. You go where you can actually most closely support your theatre of operations, and you make the logistics fit it. You don't always get to choose, I want the place which is best located for my logistics. You have to go for the place which is best located for your theatre of operations. Also, I think, I'm fairly sure if Singapore doesn't fall, and that's all being run through Singapore, Roosevelt might find a way to get rid of MacArthur as commander of ground forces or something. Or rather, Supreme Commander. Supreme Commander will be probably someone who is allied, and the MacArthur will be Ground Forces Commander or something below that level. Because again, it's being run from Singapore. It's being supported by the Allies. We have to show our solidarity. The Allies, we can't demand command of it. Anything that keeps MacArthur from being annoying. Volunteer per order sudden. What about the schemes for cloud gas against attacks by barge or submarine against Heligoland and Gallipoli made them technically unfeasible?
Probably the wind.
Yeah, it is. It is the wind. It's the wind. It's also the temperatures.
My suggestion for MacArthur's role is Chief Inspector of Latrines.
The Japanese can't cut off Singapore. If they've taken Malaya and they've taken Singapore, they can use it to cut off a lot of places. But if Singapore itself isn't cut off, and it isn't taken, then Singapore is actually quite easy to resupply relatively in terms of direction, because there are lots of places you can come from where you'll be coming from behind Singapore in the face of the Japanese. And the Japanese can't take the islands the other side of Singapore if they don't have Singapore. And so that's the sort of the reality of the situation you're dealing with. It's an interesting scenario. It's also, it's one of the things of the Indian Ocean is, you have to think about how far Singapore actually is from Japan to sustain and support major operations to try and cut off, versus for the British and the Americans, if they're coming up and they're supporting it, it's a very different. It does also change the war in Malaysia if you've got Singapore still under British control, Allied control. Brandon Larson. What if all 5 1989 Nimitz-class supercarriers that accompany escorts and supply ships, crews, and supplies for 24 months of maximum ops are sent back in time to either early World War II or Vietnam? We've discussed this many times. Basically, for Vietnam, it provides a whole lot of fire support. Doesn't really change much because you're dealing with guerrilla warfare, and fire support is great. That's getting very political. Okay, a bin face question.
Nut dog. Mew.
Yeah, Brandon Larson. Oh, thank you for the hydrate, Nightwolf. But honestly, if it goes back to early World War II, and it's complete victory very shortly, because you're dealing with largely conventional military forces, and in a nicest way, 5 Nimitz-class supercarriers in early World War II could probably finish off the German armed forces, and the Italian armed forces, and everyone else. Where's World of Science Tech? I'm presuming you're meaning the Canadian River class. And in which case... Well... It would give it more space systems, but also does, if you think about that, think about the much sheer amount of infrastructure and support that Canada have to build to support and sustain them. It's one of the things of, you're going to have to massively increase the Canadian budget, and while you're building infrastructure, etc., and all these things, it's going to take time, and the ships they are going through ships they have in service are going out of service when they're going out of service. And also, I would say as well, what are you using those larger hulls for? You haven't got task groups you need to quarterback. They haven't got forces they need. They haven't got forces they need that sort of large ship capable of command ship for. They are largely providing ASW and escorts and screening assets to allied task groups as part of their alliance fix. It sort of fits of numbers are a benefit here, numbers and breadth of capability. So whilst you could do that, having them all being 12,000-ton hulls probably wouldn't really help the Canadians that much. Saying that, I'm acknowledging that they're doing. If they were bigger, they could carry a lot more space as their systems. I would have a lot more space as systems, and that's not something bad. But yeah, you would. It's gonna be expensive. Jan 25. What period was the Royal Navy best funded? Napoleonic Wars. There were several points in the Napoleonic Wars where the Royal Navy was being funded so well the government didn't know how much money it was giving them.
Imagine if the Royal Navy had the power to levy and manage its own taxes.
No, during that period, the Royal Navy could finance its own bonds. And thanks to the way the system worked, we always think about, the money you earn from ships, the crews earned from ships as being a great amount of money, okay? The prize money you got for ships. Just remember, the prize money comes from the Navy selling the ships, or buying the ships. They sell quite a lot of the ships, the merchant ships. And the money, they get to keep the money. They keep the money which they charge, and their admiralty section of the money. So some of the money for the sale gets given to the crew. A large chunk of money gets kept for the Navy. So at several points during the Napoleonic Wars, the Royal Navy was, thank you very much, we're receiving tax money from the government as well. That's lovely. How much money do you need? We need a lot of money, sir. Here is all the costs. At no point do they explain how much money the Royal Navy itself is taking in from other sources.
So basically, what I'm hearing is that the Royal Navy needs to reintroduce the prize system.
The Royal Navy also did a very nice line in escorting trade. In using some very special frigates to make sure the silver money and the specie, got from South America to the UK for the trade with China for the East India Company. And trust me, the Royal Navy charged.
Like an irritated rhino, I'm sure.
Yeah. This the thing is, if the British government reintroduced prize money and said Russian tank, the various vessels in the world which aren't being properly flagged and aren't being properly insured are subject to claiming, you would be amazed at how quickly the Royal Navy would manage to get on with that task. Because at a certain point you have enough income coming in that the Royal Navy is financing itself, not the British government. So that means the Admiralty is deciding to fund infrastructure and fund these spendings over and above whatever the government's trying to fund them. Unfortunately, with modern governments, they try and say, oh, as you're getting self-funded now, we don't have to give you money. Which would actually end up becoming a problem. Or they privatise it. Actually, no, they probably say it's now creating such a profit, we've privatised the Royal Navy.
I'm now imagining the Royal Navy with what would then become a privately owned... That would be the first privately owned active intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Yeah.
The British government could claim another first.
Yeah. Alternatively, the British government might find themselves taken over by their own by the Navy they just privatised.
I mean, it's definitely a way of maintaining an independent nuclear deterrent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How independent is it? It's privatised. it's organised by a private company who we have contracted to provide continuous at-sea deterrence.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if you are late on payments? Well, they...
Don't be late on payments.
What's the town/city/locality that is like British Camden?
No, it's probably more likely. A nice way it would be the Prime Minister's constituency would cease to have functioning existence or something like that.
Sheffield. There we go.
Yeah.
I got it. Where it's like, or we will nuke Sheffield. They nuke Sheffield. I don't notice a difference.
Yeah.
Well, they could. I mean, they could nuke Milton Keynes, and then people would celebrate.
Are they contracting Somali pirates? No, they won't end up contracting them. They don't have the legs to reach the UK, that's the problem. Castanet, do we have any tales of British or Prussian versus French battles on the Rhine or Elbe during the Napoleonic Wars? There were a few, but they're not really naval battles so much as we've brought an artillery barge with us, we're trying to do a river crossing.
We're trying to contest your river crossing.
Yes. The Prussians were mostly infantry, cavalry, and artillery people. The Prussians were not really that good at navies. They had a few startling achievements, but mostly it was a case of, good God, that person's good. How? What happened to them? We have no idea. They're not really our sort, are they? No. As good as they are, they're not our sort. We're not going to promote them. And then, a few years later, why did they go off and join the Russians? Oh, they offered them payment, a title and an ability, and generally some respect. Traitorous scum! We treated them like ship. Yes! But we're their country! Nice to hear, everyone. If the French Navy had a choice between a 37,500-ton 27-knot battlecruiser and a 21-knot Normandy, and they chose the battlecruiser for carrier conversion, how much better off are the Free French?
You're assuming the Free French get that vessel?
That carrier is good enough. It's either sunk by the British before it can operate against them, or it is owned by the Free French. It's useful. It's probably an extra carrier supporting operations in the North Atlantic, which is useful, and probably has a works of air group, which means you potentially have something. You have it around. If the Free French do have it, they probably have it around operating during the Battle of Denmark Strait period. So potentially you have that and Victorious providing strikes, which would be quite useful. We'll see what happens. Montana says, how could the British have designed the hood to survive Denmark Strait from commissioning? Actually built it as a fast battleship rather than a battlecruiser? Not had the same bad luck?
Yeah, Hood is such a golden BB that I kind of feel like blaming the designers for Hood's demise is a bit cruel.
Yeah.
Like, it's not completely unjustified, but it is a bit cruel.
Foxhound, lol. I work for a racehorse trainer who got upset when a jockey went to work for someone who actually paid him. Oh, good lord, that's terrible.
I'm going to ask an extremely ignorant question.
Yeah.
But I can't help myself.
Carry on.
I'm not saying it is a skillless job. I just don't understand the skill involved in being a jockey. There's obviously skill to it. I don't understand.
Basically, you are the smallest person that can physically control a giant animal that's their natural tendency is to run away from things.
Fair enough.
Basically, they are people who make up for their size with sheer willpower and personality. And a lot of training. A lot of training to make up for it. Speaking from experience of watching growing up in part of the world which had a whole lot of horse riders, racehorses. Racehorses are the skittiest, most insane tinderboxes of bundle of nerves and reflexes you'll ever meet. And they are beautiful animals, but they are also, you need to be really strong in terms of personality to actually control them. Because they have... It's not even split-second reactions. Their instinct is flight or flight. If they get startled or disturbed. So from what Dr. Clarke has said, Foxo would make a good jockey. She certainly has a strong enough personality. Brandon Larson. What if all the F-4 Phantoms in the US Air Force were replaced with the F-15C and F-16C, while the US Navy and US Marine Corps ones are replaced with F-14 Tomcat and Hornets on a one-for-one basis? When?
Yes.
When?
That is the critical question. When?
Is this during the Vietnam War? In which case they again win the air war. They won it the last time.
The trick is not winning the air war. The trick is winning the hearts and minds of the population.
I'd say the trick is
Which is
actually stopping the logistics supply, but we'll carry on with that one.
and not losing the hearts and minds of your own populations.
Yeah, that was more trouble. They lost the heart and minds of everyone else.
Yeah, I am inclined to say that the reason Vietnam went the way Vietnam did was a lot of it was Washington,
It was,
for good, bad, or indifferent. A lot of it was Washington.
McNamara tried to make war fighting a mathematical exercise.
Didn't the Germans try that twice?
His was actually, we're going to kill more of theirs than we kill more than we lose ours. And he didn't understand that the people don't care about how many they killed the enemy; they care about how many lost their own. So the moment you start reporting those figures like they're, I don't know, the baseball scores on news, it starts drumming home just how many you're losing. Not how many more of the enemy you're killing, how many more you're losing.
Yeah, it's not like the World War II Battle of Britain kind of scores where people in quite a lot of the country can actually see the air battles happening, and actually,
and also, it's going to sound
an existential threat.
It's going to sound terrible. The difference in World War II in the Battle of Britain is the battles are happening over the UK for the security of the UK. In Vietnam, it's over there.
Yeah.
It's not happening. It's not taking close enough to America for America to really see it that way.
Yeah. But the Germans made attempts at
saying he had a strategy is is giving it a lot of more credit than it was. I know there are critiques of the current government and their issues, the current government of the US and most of the Western governments and their issues in dealing with long-term management of war. But that's because most of them focus more on the PR side than the actual running of the war. McNamara actually focused on the running of the war, but was trying to run it like a maths exercise.
Yeah. In terms of the Germans trying to run war like a maths exercise, actually, I think, to be honest, the Royal Artillery are possibly worse offenders at doing that, because the two things I can think of that the Germans did with that kind of precision and things were, one, the organisation of the wasteful policies they undertook whilst also engaged in the war.
Yeah.
That are why I don't have reasonably large chunks of family. And the U-boat warfare, where they made up a target out of thin air in terms of how many ships they would need to sink, rather than actually working it out.
Yeah, and also you have to remember in their analysis they never once considered the concept of what happens if the British start building more ships.
Yeah.
It's always the interesting one. If you look at something about the German pre-war analysis and you go through it, they very rarely consider the concept of what happens if the British respond to our plan.
Yeah, they're not good at that. It's because they have a ridiculous focus on short wars, and just fail to realise that the British do not do short wars.
Okay.
The British?
No, they don't.
No. Although it had got very annoying that we weren't able to just use our usual policy, which was hire a load of Germans to beat up whoever we didn't like on the continent.
Yeah, we usually did that. We hired them for their ground war to go and do the beating up for us, and they didn't like it.
I'm now just imagining a universe in which Germany said the sea is for the Brits, the land is for the Germans, forever and ever. Amen.
I don't think anyone is trying to rewrite the history of the invaded Vietnam thing, because the Americans came in to response to the French leaving to support what was considered the democratically friendly government, or at least the Western friendly government, it was not a success. It was in the nicest way. I hate to say this, but most when you do very rapid decolonization, you usually create issues, and because, and I stress this much, you have spent years ruling those people by force. You have.
You have set up mechanisms of oppression, normally through internal
Yes.
mechanisms, because that's cheaper.
And that's how you continue ruling, by force. And then you decide to suddenly, rapidly withdraw before the counterbalances have been rebuilt in society that existed before you took them away, because you were the counterbalance to those things, while you were the colonial power. And I'm sorry, that people always go, oh, that means you're infantilizing people. No, you're not. It's just, here's what happens. The colonial power leaves. There is untidiness. There is a mess. There's people not sure who's going to be in charge, what's going to happen. There's all sorts of people worrying. And what do the police or the army do? Well, they've always been taught to resolve problems by using force. And so they resolve it by using force, and usually end up setting themselves up as a dictatorship. And there aren't the institutional memories built in, because as a colonial power you get them out, to actually counterbalance those. So, disturbingly enough, usually what you need to arrange is either you stay around or someone else stays around to support the government as it comes in, and basically allow it to get its feet, and allow the let's say, democratic practices and other practices to bed themselves into the population, and bed themselves in, and re-establish themselves before you leave, because otherwise the same thing will happen, because it's human nature to try and bring order to when you see chaos. It's just, it happens so many times, and people go, it's not to do with the people, it's the situation you've left them in. It's literally, you've left them in a mess, and it's your job to keep it, to clean it up. It really is.
I mean, look at what happened to some of Britain's North American colonies.
Yeah.
What an absolute shit show.
It's been terrible.
I know. 150 years
Yeah.
later, and they're still a mess.
Ouch.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, ouch.
I'm just hearing what's happened with Virginia's power policy recently, and that just seems very. It basically seems to be go into West Virginia and rob them for all the power we can get, because we don't want to build the power ourselves.
All right, you need to link me on that, because I live here. I work with grid providers, so I am slightly smarter than your average bear.
Yes, but it was mostly I've mostly seen articles coming from my family who live in West Virginia complaining about it. And some of them work in the grid in West Virginia. And they're basically complaining non-stop about Virginia at the moment.
I thought that was the whole point about West Virginia, was that it existed to complain about Virginia.
Yes. Harry Goodson, with Sheffield Forge Masters having started to manufacture artillery barrels in Ukraine, can they in theory restart production for the 15-inch barrel gun if they was interested? Okay, so I'm going to preface this by saying, Sheffield, that particular site never produced 15-inch guns from my memory. So it wouldn't be restarting, it would be starting it, but it would be restarting, I suppose, at the initial level. But you would have to start it again from complete and utter scratch. So whilst in theory it is not impossible to do, in theory, it is going to be very, very expensive. And the trouble is, you have asked me the question of in theory rather than practically. In theory, therefore, the answer is yes. Because theoretically, it is going and getting the old going systems and starting building the manufacturing plant and the facilities you need and the rolling machines, etc., and then carrying out the process. In practice, that would be about 20 years' work.
because you'd need to. It's the um, actually not that dull, boring process of drilling a perfect kind of hole and then putting rifling, or I suppose just a hole and then you possibly have a liner um, through about 100 tons of metal.
Oh,
It's
you don't.
more so the boring process of you have to build the tools to make the tools to make the tools.
Yeah, and also
Yeah.
you don't. Whilst you do rifle it a little bit, you can rifle it a bit if you want to. Um, uh,
You're not going
you
to
don't.
suggest sweep.
You don't. I'm not sure why you're doing it. You're doing it from a solid lump of metal.
I thought that the way they did it was they kind of took an ingot that was kind of the gun shape, and then basically drilled out the central part to kind of, I don't know what the word is, create the hole through it rather than um, doing it a different way, like trying to think how else you might do it. Isn't that how they did it?
It's usually done by hot forging. So yeah, you do. There is some drilling involved, but there is a lot more shaping. I'm trying to
Okay.
think. Trying to look for the video. There is a lovely video done by on Bethlehem Steel. And I'll send you the link. There you go. So, yeah, I'll just send you the link.
So apparently, there is a planet in Helldivers named Mort.
Okay.
For anybody who's watched any of the DreamWorks Madagascar franchise, I am concerned that somebody named a planet after Mort.
Oh, there are worse options.
Could they have named it Manly Power?
Potentially, they could have done. Potentially.
Honestly, given at least the memes around Helldivers, having a planet called Manly Power would be annoyingly on brand.
It'd be quite funny to watch. Ah, there's message. There you go. Yeah. Eventually that
Thank you.
worked.
Are you putting the memester chief in the soda?
I have to say I'm having fun at the moment with some of the things because okay, so Jack Ray, as we all know, has been doing this lovely website, which is going to have has all the details, all the videos I produced, all those things on. And I've been having real fun going through it, but also I do know, and finding areas which I thought I had covered but haven't really covered as much as I wanted to. And now it's being added to is the added fun coming into it is he's had to make everything be British English spelling.
Have you considered that might qualify for cruel and unusual punishment, Doctor?
Yeah, it is. It is. It is. Nice to hear from in Modern Warships development blog. I'm so hoping Dragon is online for this. Tier 9 Respublica.
He will be coming online eventually. He has told me via arcane draconic signaling.
Okay,
so if we want to hold
pause that for him.
He's active.
Calvin Gasberg, what and when can trigger a planned CGN type? If future tense is justified, what could it be like? I wouldn't be surprised if the Chinese do go for a nuclear-powered cruiser at some point or something like that. The reason being, if the Chinese are going to they're considering getting a nuclear-powered carrier, all these things, considering their logistical reality, if going for a nuclear cruiser is a very easy way to get the capabilities, to get a boost in capabilities in terms of their ability to project power globally without necessarily having the support infrastructure in place for it. So basically, nuclear power is a very good way to bootstrap up your capabilities and go, we can project power more regularly further than we normally should do. Because we don't have to bring the fuel, we only have to bring the food. Yeah. Brandon Larson, what if there were 10 infinitely class super carriers at the fall of Reach, with their accompanying 10 escort class frigates? They can each carry in their internal subbase. How does it go for the SNC? You've got 10 infinities at Reach. And 100 frigates.
That's something. If they're infinity, if to my knowledge, which is like third hand regarding Infinity and her capabilities, that is not quite a walkover, but it is approaching an out of context problem for the Covenant forces as assembled.
It is.
But I think that one is also going to be a dragon help question.
Iron Duke, why were Glorious and Courageous not modernized like a Clarke and Kaga? Because honestly, they weren't going to be around that long. They're experimentals, and the British are planning on replacing them. You have to remember, the British have go into the 1920s and 30s, and they have the most carriers of anyone in the world in terms of numbers of ships. But they also have a vast majority of their carriers are considered experimental type because of when they were launched, so they can replace them whenever they wish to, which means they've done a lot of basically banking on being able to build their ships later, so that they've already worked out what they want to build when they get there later. So basically, that's why they're not investing in modernizing them as much as the Japanese are.
Before we get too far away, I would also say that for Carl von Gazenberg's question about the planned CGN, if Defiance do get cut steel as nuclear.
Yeah, that's another scenario, but I get it.
I think as soon as they actually cut the steel for it, and it's billed as a nuclear powered vessel, you will see the plan at least announce something.
Yeah, because they want the same status. Because Trump's nuclear power does have a status of vessel. It does give a vessel status. You know, it's an ego trip. Sadu, could someone please debunk the whole River class destroyer? Is it a pack pocket cruiser? That some people believe. No, it's a destroyer. It's a low end destroyer, but it is a destroyer. And when I say low end destroyer, high end frigate, low end destroyer, what am I meaning? It's a general purpose destroyer. It's got very capabilities in terms of it's based on an ASW frigate design, a very good ASW frigate design, and so it's more orientated. Its hull structure and many things is orientated around anti-submarine warfare frigate duties, but it's also got a healthy dose of air defense capabilities. So it's a high-end ASW asset, low-end low to medium-end air warfare asset, because it's not entirely orientated around that function. And it's got to share some of its duties in role, because it's a general purpose combatant. So it's one of the things of, if they were going to make it high-end in both roles, it would need to be bigger, because it would need to take more computers. This is probably nuance where people are going to be screaming at me in the chat going, no, it's going to have this weapon. Yes, but how many of those weapons is it going to have? How are the sensors again? How high are they? How much computing power can it devote to that? But when it's also devoting quite a lot of computing power to the ASW warfare, all those things add in. Thank you, YouTube Minecraft Watcher. Thank you for the posture check. I will do, instead of checking my posture, I will rock my rocking chair. Lamb
But
frustrated.
the chair doesn't squeak anymore. It's not the same.
It's my older wooden chair and it doesn't squeak. No. Lamb frustrated. Is it possible to overdo a port call? I have a story on the go where it shows up for a port call with 2 nuclear powered and a railgun armed Montanas, a 4-class and escorts to sign a treaty. Yeah, it is possible to overshoot it. There is possibility you turn up and just go. Yeah.
This diplomatic visit looks surprisingly like an invasion.
Yes, it's when you turn up and you have. Do I have a link to the Jack Ray website? Yes, I do. Let me just.
So basically, you turn up with that level of force when you're signing an unconditional surrender in
Japan,
St. Petersburg. Thing.
in
Yeah.
1945.
Yeah, if you're signing up for that much, if you're taking up that much firepower, you've got problems.
Also, you don't really want to take a Ford class into the harbour.
No, you really don't.
But all the cool kids are doing it.
Yeah.
I may have many thoughts on such things, but yeah, I wouldn't be all that keen on putting a. I think any which way I cut it, putting several thousand people and about 100,000 tons of ship somewhere just as a show of because I can, and to some extent because I can risk it, it leaves me feeling uncomfortable.
But that's the American.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to kind of put a sloop there. See also Royal Navy sloop tagging along for the Tsingtao incident to free the SS. We think it's called St. Vincent de Paul, but don't check its paperwork too closely.
Yeah. Yeah. The important thing was it was flying a British flag when it was captured. That's the important thing.
I mean, it had only been run up 3 minutes before, and it possibly wasn't entitled to it, but that's not the point.
Okay, people now starting a campaign to bring back the squeaky chair. This is worrying. The amount of people who've been complaining for years about the squeaky chair. I do some Bruships without the squeaky chair, and people are complaining to bring it back.
Doc.
I will campaign for many things, but the squeaky chair return is a no. As is the hot tub historian.
Don't worry. I've got plans. The next hot tub historians are going to be the full ship-shape crew in the hot tub.
Shudders. But I am.
And don't worry, I have got enough. I have got enough material on my other 2 colleagues that they have said that as they will be forced to do it, they'll be bringing you. Danny's going, I will be hiding.
No, I'm just thinking. I don't think I can fight off Drac. He's too good at combat, and I suspect he might sit there in full armor.
Yeah. I don't think the hot tub will ruin the armor.
Yeah, he needs to remember sometimes he doesn't have like a team of people to polish it afterwards.
Yep.
Is that what Princess Rakinafella is for?
Potentially.
Did he need a squire?
Potentially. Montana 67. Is the ASCV the first Western cruiser since the Tychos? The Tychos are cruisers in name only, but yes, it is. Certainly since it's the most recent cruiser built since Long Beach. 1981. Is the capture used as president and then her copying by the British the main or one of the main reasons why her name was never reused? No, it was the main reason was it was a way to brag at our American counterparts. They know exactly who what her name continues on from. It's not the president of the Board of Trade. Stafford Thompson. The French decided to copy the US standards for their ships. How does this affect naval build-up for the Germans during World War I? Not a jot, because the problem isn't the design of the French ships. The problem is their ability to build them. and the Germans are outbuilding them. Timu, should European nations come together and have their own anti-ballistic missile defense that can be on land or sea? I think they're slowly sort of. I think that's partially what the Aquila and various other things are working. I think is it the Aquila? I can't remember what it is, but yeah, they are working on that those sort of things. But we'll see what happens. It's going to take funding and a lot of work, and it's going to take some actual long-term investment and cooperation, and frankly, countries aren't good with that.
There is, I think, there's a version of the Aster and the radars associated with that the Royal Navy doesn't have that does anti-ballistic missile.
No, they were considering there are upgrades for the Aster. The British radar, actually, Samson radar system can do it, and so can the long range radar system, which we have fitted, which is the S. I always forget the numbering of it. The long range S1850 we have on the back. That's long range radar. But the thing is, we haven't paid for the upgrades to the missiles. We actually have. It's basically we haven't paid for updates to our missiles in over a decade.
Doc, we keep
paying towards the research to work out the updates for them. Then we don't buy the updates.
Why?
Doc, if you ever find the individual that coined the term "fitted for" but not with, what are you going to do to them?
Long conversation in a dark alley. Aquila, yeah. And that's it. But that was also originally the Aster 45 and all sorts of fun things. Sidhu, what do you know about the Canadian combat system? Because nations who really ought to be going the American one are going with the Canadian one for some reason. It's open. It's far more able to be adapted than the American one. The American one has lots of proprietary patented technologies. Brandon Larson, you're in command of the Franco-Spanish fleet of 40 ships of the line and are tasked with securing the Western Mediterranean. What is your strategy and what do you do if the RN fleet attacks you? I blockade Gibraltar. If I'm trying to secure the Western Mediterranean, I blockade Gibraltar. I'm presuming the period of making is during the Franco-Spanish alliance, in which case I go for Gibraltar. I blockade Gibraltar and I try and siege it as well. Blockade and siege Gibraltar.
Also, I think there's a slight error in the phrasing of that question. What do you do when an RN fleet attacks you, not if?
Yeah, I know. You're going to have to fight a battle, but basically, you're going to have to try and win. But if you're blockading Gibraltar, you might actually have a chance because you're at sea. Dr. Clarke, what recent failed, or not as good as it should have been, military program would you change so it was done properly? I find myself jumping 12 to 14 Type 45s built with everything they were designed for, or 21 new build Nimrod MR4s. See both of the above. I think the thing that I really always annoyed me most was the person who decided to turn around to Bulwark and Albion and went, I'm going to delete the hospital deck and the hangar from you because I don't think they're necessary for your jobs. Literally, someone looked at the amphibious warfare ships of the Royal Navy and went, I don't think you having a hospital deck and a hangar facility so you can actually repair your own helicopters is required by your functions.
Well, Doc, efficiencies must be made.
Yeah.
Although, speaking of efficiencies, I almost would like to lock you in a room with a family member of mine, and possibly my father, and have them explain their house plans to you so you could potentially have a stroke.
I'm going to be back in a second. I'm going to go find out why there are dogs wolfing downstairs. But in the meantime, take 15 questions, please. I'll be back in a second. And Dan and Runon, please keep chatting. Right, why is there a dog making so much noise downstairs?
I mean, the other one in terms of the things that you could do better would include building the third carrier for the Royal Navy, uh, um, not slowing down the production of SSNs quite so much. There are so many. I sometimes find it a bit uh, worrying. I feel I know more about the British ones than most other countries kind of slip ups like that. Although the early Burks not having helicopter hangars is probably one. Got any thoughts, Runon?
Let me look at the question and actually apply some brain power. LCS, keep the speed under 40 knots. Zumwalt, ditch railgun out of the Zumwalt program. Maybe keep AGS. Maybe keep AGS into its. Maybe partition AGS back off into its own program. You
could have tied. You could have tied the AGS into one of the. Sorry.
The Fords. Put a different engineer in charge of their waste handling systems. Lightning basically allow tier. I don't know how the Lightning program was divvied up because I know like Israelis got they have the F-35I, which is a variant of the A question mark? It's either a variant of the A or a variant of the C. It's not a variant of the B. I know that much. Yeah. And then I think the Turks were slated to get a downrated version of the F-35, and then who was it? Erdogan went more Russophilic than NATOphilic, and that I think Turkey has been cut largely from that program.
It's because they had the S-400 and they were basically built one or the other. Was the kind of excuse.
A very long-winded way of saying, I'd say for like tier 1 partners, so you're looking basically Security Council.
Okay, this is an announcement on behalf of all corgis everywhere. If you have made their dinner, leaving their dinner on top of a table in their room, and forgetting to put it down for them, is a very distressing experience for the corgi. Please put the food on the floor so they can eat the food. Don't put it in tantalizing distance and then forget about it. Okay? An announcement on behalf of all corgis.
But basically give the tier 1, quote-unquote, partners root level access to F-35 software systems.
Well, I think the only theoretically, the only tier 1 partner was Britain.
Yeah, and Britain hasn't got that.
Yeah, well, that to me is a flaw that I think should be justified. But, what do I know? I'm just a dumb transcription.
It's one of those things of... Basically, it's all there on a governmental level. It's not there on a company level.
Well, yes. But the government is the one that cuts the checks and writes the contract. So
yeah, but in the nicest way, America is. If you've ever tried trying to force corporate America to do anything it didn't want to?
No, and I understand that corporate America is language I can't use on this channel. but at the same time, it's a thing of, okay, Congress or industry, or sorry, government contracting firms, you need to go and find your big gender appropriate britches and install them onto your posterior, so that you can, I don't know, novel concept, but do your frickin' job.
Hmm.
Like just a thunk, just a singular thunk.
Right.
Am I thinking too hard, Dan? Do I need to stop thinking? Do I need to go back to being a tiny little plebe with no opinions ever?
Probably. I mean,
It's
Okay.
probably better for your
I think
morale.
I think you're mistaking the true job of Congress as being representing the best interests of their constituents, as opposed to representing the best interests of whoever's funding their campaigns.
Doc, I live in America right now. Where is this morale that I'm allegedly supposed to have?
You
Is
have
it in the room
morale.
with us?
You have
Yeah,
morale.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you said have some morale or something
Um.
to that. I don't know.
So, on behalf of Dragon, a friend of ours recently stated a Leon class would be able to reasonably fight a Francisco Caracola class. Do you agree? In general, how would you compare the two classes?
He's also missing a subset to that question, which is, um, are are France and Italy engaged in a quantitative or a qualitative or a hybridization of their arms race?
It's more of a It's more of a nicest way. The Italians are part of the qualitative race. The French are just runners up. They're not even part of the qualitative race. The French are following on. The Francisco Caracola carries 8 15-inch guns and is capable of doing 28 knots. The Leon class would go, well, I have 16 13.4-inch guns. Yes, you do. You can do 21 knots. The Francisco Caracola has a 7 knot at a speed advantage. Francisco Caracola can decide where it's going to engage, from what side it's going to engage, and how it's going to engage. And honestly, its belt is thicker, its turret armor is thicker. And when I say thicker, the turrets for the Leons is 11.8 inches. The turrets for the Francisco Caracola are 15.7 inches. The deck armor is 2 inches thick on the Francisco Caracola. It's between 1.7 and 2.8 inches thick on the Leons, so that's the slight thickness. But even the waterline belt for the Leons is 11.8 inches, and the Caracolas is 11.9 inches. One is 300 millimeters, and one's 309. Or 303 millimeters. It's just, it's a case of, yes, when you're looking at firepower, you can say it has more firepower than a Francisco Caracola. But in reality, the Caracola can be picking off at whatever range it wants to pick off at, and its guns could conceivably, especially in the considering amounts of outrange the French guns. So it could conceivably has an effective firing range of, let's see, 19 kilometers, and the effective firing range. Ooh. Oh. Yeah. So, effective firing range, as in not its maximum range, its effective firing range in its naval form, for the time period we're talking about, gives the Italian ships a 1 kilometer advantage. Which, considering combined with a 7 knot advantage, means they can pick range and angle of attack and timing of attack and everything else. Means that whilst I am sure the Leon would put up a very tough fight, it wouldn't ultimately be the winner. However, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, if you are not going to have a scenario where they're fighting one-on-one and it's that sort of scenario, it's going to be a fleet battle of some concept form, and that's where you're going to have the interesting scenarios. I would also say that is where things like the carrier capability that the French have is going to have an impact. If they can slow down the Caracola, then they can muller it because of the sheer weight of fire they're bringing to bear. Because there isn't as much difference between a 13-point-something-inch gun and a 15-inch gun as they'd like to believe. And if you've got twice as much firepower in terms of your shells, in terms of numbers of shells, you're going to have an impact. But the fact is, it's a battle, it's a fleet scenario, they have a chance. In a one-on-one, it's really not a fair fight. Because my individual shells are going to hit hard on you, I'm going to be able to pick when I hit you, I'm going to be able to pick, you know, what you're doing when I hit you. It's a case of I could attack you from an angle where you could only find 8 guns to bear. It's fine by me. You can't fire all 16 guns. I can fire all 8 of mine. So you can only fire 8 of yours? Alternatively, I could do a drive-by shooting and try and keep that kilometre extra range. So your shells are going to be effectively not. We're not talking about maximum firing range. We're talking about effective firing range, right? So, maximum firing range is you putting in maximum charge, maximum elevation, and you're firing as far as you can. That's brilliant. That's often not the most accurate firing of the gun, though. That's often the gun which is going to have the most dispersion. When you've got effective firing range is when the dispersion is at a level at which you are guaranteed to get a shot within kill range of the type of thing you're aiming for. Okay? And so that's the interesting thing. Because at maximum firing range, I think the French gun might actually have the advantage, but in maximum effective firing range, the Italian gun has the advantage. So it's a really interesting. It is an interesting one, that one, but again, it's the speed. It's a 7-knot advantage of speed. That has a big difference.
It was the topic of a spirited discussion earlier this week.
Which friend was making?
Into which I had.
Are you on?
Given that Dragon has not named this person, I will do the same. But I do recommend that, despite the relative difficulty of doing so, that somebody needs to drag him to a shooting range and have him shoot some steel at extended range.
Leon's, nothing is yet set in stone yet. We are all in the group waiting for news from Greenwich University. So, that's what we're waiting for. Gareth is doing his best. We're crossing our fingers. We're all hoping. We're all crying. I think Fleet said he can't go because he can't get time off from work now because it's got so late, and it's the worry for all of us pretty much. And there is part which goes, right then, if I need to move this back, what else do I do in the October period? And honestly, my backup trip is to basically drag at least 2 of the shipshape crew and go around Portugal. And then do Falklands at some point earlier in the next year. But we'll see what we have to do.
Come stateside.
Oh,
we can barbecue.
Yeah, that is cool. But the other thing is we could drag you to Portugal. Don't think you've been to Portugal, have you?
I'm going to be blunt. The idea of traipsing around the Iberian Peninsula isn't overly
Isn't Runon's cup of coffee?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's probably going to be most, and I'm going to hereby have, by some weird quirk of fate, a very, I think, Rita gamer, if memory serves, from
Yes.
years ago, show up in chat and eviscerate me.
If
But
we
that's
if we were doing the Portugal one, I would also try and invite Rita. That's the important thing.
um,
Because
but
there's no point. You know, if you can do Portugal, it's one thing. If you can do Portugal with Rita alongside to help, while you're going around doing doing stuff in Portugal and Spain, it's far more fun. It'll be far
yeah,
more fun.
see, the nice thing about Australia and the Falklands and a hypothetical, UK trip is that there is functionally there is a dialect barrier, but not a language barrier. I don't speak a lick of Latin root or languages.
That doesn't matter really in Portugal and Spain.
I understand that English is a nearly it is as close to a cradle language as it can be for a second language in 90% of Europe. But yeah, still.
In Portugal, it's even worse than that. There are people I know who in Portugal who are Portuguese, born in Portugal, lived in Portugal for the first first 25 years of their life, and they will tell you their first words were in English because they learned to speak English almost before they learned Portuguese.
Lamau, skill issue, LOL, question mark?
1981. So, what do we know about the Revenge preliminary designs T1 to T4? Basically, they are about working out what they're going to lose. In terms of to make them the affordable 15-inch fleet ship of the line, and it's an affordable ship of the line. It's an interesting discussion because they decide they don't want to lose armor, and so the thing they sacrifice is speed. But it was very nearly look. It's not in T1 to T4 in terms of official design slots. But there is in personal design studies, there are some interesting things which look like the forerunners of the Nelrod's idea and the ZF3s and G3s idea of can we get away with 9 15-inch guns and 3 triple turrets, and what happens if we sort of group them together, sort of thing. And can we get the high speed then at the cost we want? OMG, hello. Hello. 1982. Would it be feasible for Argentina to pre-position a sub near Ascension when it was announced the UK would respond? And was there concerned time possibility? Theoretically, they have one sub available. Theoretically, you could pre-position it if you could support a tanker. And there was worry about the possibility, and that's why the first ships which turn up in Ascension are ASW frigates who then sanitize the area and probably kill a whole lot of whales. The whole thing is in peacetime in exercises and sort of we are very careful about what we shoot at. In wartime, you don't take the chance. If you think if it's got a chance of being the submarine, you stick some depth charges in there or some torpedoes in there, depending on what you're dropping from what. It works. But yeah, that was a fear. That was a real worry.
Because let's face it, it's what the Royal Navy would do.
I have to say there is a Lynx pilot I know who after Falklands War called himself the greatest fisherman ever known to mankind because of how many schools of fish he dropped depth charges on.
I mean, if you dropped one of the spicy depth charges they allegedly weren't carrying, you could have had it ready cooked.
No.
Yes, but Doc, you and I both know this, okay? because I'm certain you did you've done at least some time in radiology. There is no food permitted in the RCA.
Yep.
You and I both know this. We've both had at least similar in concept training. One may not consume victuals inside the RCA.
Yep.
And for those listening at home who do not know what in the blue blazes I'm talking about, in at least American radiation training, RCA equals radiation control area or something very, very close to it.
Basically, don't take any food, especially not foil wrap food or anything within which might have things like that, near something which is radioactive.
Yep. Unless you want to make some very angry people or some very unfun people from the Department of Energy very, very grumpy at you.
Yes.
Which,
Well,
I mean, you can. I mean,
you can do it. You won't do it a second time. You won't be allowed back.
Yeah.
Floppy 78. The Russians experimented with large caliber recoilless guns. Could they be used instead of torpedoes on destroyers for use against capital ships?
No. Well, yes, but no.
Ish, a bit. I mean, probably not on destroyers. I might do it on torpedo boats. A bit like you have a missile, but the missile armed version of torpedo boat. The advantage of the torpedo is it bypasses so many of the defenses and does the damage really good and deep, whereas the recoilless rifle's probably going to go above the waterline.
I think you're all thinking about this in terms of weapon. I'm thinking this in terms of platform. And in the period where destroyers are fitted with it, there are very few destroyers which are going to be stable enough that using a recoilless rifle is going to be accurate enough to be able to use like a torpedo to replace a torpedo. It isn't impossible, but you're going to have to do a lot of work.
I'm open to listening to the mechanics of a recoilless rifle here.
Yeah, I'm also thinking through that as well. I was thinking through stability profile of the platform and then thinking mechanics of the recoilless rifle. I think the thing is, if you're prepared to spend a lot of money and accept a lot of inaccuracy and a lot of breakages and needing to repair a maintenance nightmare, it's doable. But I don't think it's ever going to be a viable weapon system because of those problems.
If you've got the issue, you've still got backblast.
Yeah.
And the larger the gun, the exponentially more backblast you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And destroyers don't really tend to like big explosions on deck.
No, they don't. It's not good for them. It's not good for their stability profile.
Yeah. There's context missing there. There's no way in words that you are going to successfully ban Mercedes from sale in the United States.
Why does someone want to ban Mercedes?
Because they want to ban sales by automakers with more than 15% ownership by Chinese entities. Oh, and to the person earlier who said that they enjoyed, I think that was Lions, I think, who said that they enjoyed me trying to not use profanities. Yeah, that was Lions. I hang out with a pack of tradies for 10 hours a day, 40 to 80 some odd hours a week. My father would not be impressed with my current default vocabulary.
To be fair,
and
what you hear me in this form when I'm talking like this on this channel is my little cousin friendly language. What I speak like when I'm hanging around packs of Royal Marines, which I have done quite a lot in my past, and probably will do again in future. I can fit right in and use spicy words for punctuation too, quite capably.
like I said, I still would love to, for a couple $100, no more than $1,000, just get a 2 or 3 day course on how to curse from some variation of English speaking senior enlisted.
Oh, it is an art form. It is a beautiful thing. It is
Yeah.
Exactly.
a
It's
wonderful
an
thing.
art form. You can't just do it.
The question is, you need to be able to insult an entire division for 3 days without repeating yourself. That is the thing. You cannot repeat yourself.
Although I did apparently give Dan a new exclamation for when he's out and about in his medical practice. So I now know that if I'm ever in the UK, I can test whether or not I have become a cognito hazard by visiting NHS and seeing if a certain phrase is repeated by probably a nurse when they are looking at my chart, trying to figure out why I don't have trans broken arm syndrome.
Right. Stafford Thompson, other than frigates and proper cruisers, what class of warships does the ESN really need to bring back for a well-rounded fleet?
Minesweepers or mine countermeasure warfare vessels.
Yeah, something which isn't something which is a lot cheaper than LCS for that sort of role. I'd also add in something which is more flexible than LCS for that role. Felix Swiss, Italians are good for that. Oh yes, Italians are very good. But nice way, the Italians started earlier, and let's be honest, there have been, since Oppios have been shouting at Legionnaires, the Italians have been practicing having NCOs tearing a new one out of recruits. Howard Goodson, if Teddy Roosevelt did win the 1912 election, how would it affect the war, and when would the US have entered World War One? They would have probably entered earlier because he'd have done a firm line, and his firm line would have probably been breached by the Germans at some point. So they would have entered earlier. He's not going to. The thing is, and I mean this in the nicest way for Wilson, Wilson wants peace. Wilson doesn't want war, and Teddy Roosevelt doesn't want war, but Wilson doesn't want war so much that he's prepared to keep bending over backwards until he can bend no more to avoid getting involved. Teddy Roosevelt is more going to go, these are my rules. You break this rule, we join whichever side you're not. And the odds are the Germans will end up breaking the rules first because they're in the worst position. So they're trying to break the rules to survive. Because it's the classic thing with rules of war and all these other things. When you're winning, you can afford to play by the rules because the rules are working for you. When you're losing is when you start to break the rules because the rules are no longer helping you. And that's the sad reality of warfare. So when you're winning, everyone's happy to keep to the rules. True test is, will you keep it to it when you're losing? And very few nations ever do. In fact, I can't think of any who've really kept to the rules long term when they've been losing.
UK only planned a little bit of war crimes in 1940.
Well, we also
Listen.
we also supported the resistance movements across Europe and things, which is hardly playing by the rules. And there were small diplomatic things like the Altmark incident.
Yeah.
The other thing that occurred to me was
And also,
yeah, it's
the British Empire always has the Canadians, so sometimes that's always the advantage.
that's true.
The Canadians don't break the same rule twice because mostly it's not a rule till after they've done it, and then everyone adds it in as a rule very quickly.
What did you put in the Canadian water supply?
We're not sure, but remember, America
We're
is the
not sure
country
we-
which keeps talking about which periodically has talked about invading them and finding out.
We're not sure, but it came from a mysterious mountain up somewhere near Nepal, with along with a bunch of Gurkhas.
No, Gurkhas never commit war crimes.
No.
For it to be a war crime, there'd have to be survivors and evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And Gurkhas are very good at Seneca,
Very tidy.
what would the Carrier de Gaulle do for the Free French Navy? It would be a massive advantage if they got hold of it. But if they got it, the nicest way, if they could support the Charles de Gaulle, that would be a very interesting scenario because that's taking a very modern carrier back in time. Waterbros, what are the Russians?
It's also going to do very strange things to
Yeah.
have it turn up, and it's like, especially if it turns up, I don't know, I say in June 1940, it's like, he's still a relatively obscure major general.
Yeah, why has he got an aircraft carrier named after him? But also, even more fun, if it's got its Hawkeyes and its strike aircraft and ends up in the Far East at some point, that is going to annihilate the Japanese war plans.
It's certainly going to be interesting.
Even just the
Right.
Hawkeye are going to be a monkey wrench. Sorry, Foxo.
Yeah, but you also act if this crew's not going to be on strike because they don't like the French government at this period.
Yeah.
Because even the French military in the 1940s didn't like this French government
No.
and its authoritarian leanings. You
I mean, there's
expect
also
the
the-
modern French to like the government of this period?
I think that's why they've
There's
given them
also
the sort of
stuff-
free French.
Also,
Oh,
can you
the
really
Free
see the
French.
crew? Can you really see the crew of the de Gaulle not siding with, not supporting General de Gaulle?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, because they're French, but if the other option is Pétain, I don't think it's a contest.
I think you get nominal support, but the issue is navies of this period, don't, compared to modern navies, don't treat their sailors particularly well and don't treat their crews pretty well by modern standards. Even when it comes to stuff like payment. And it's the 1930s, we're paying the 1930s French payment system. Which, as far as I had issues with not paying people. And I have never met a Frenchman that will work for free.
Nope. Okay, so next question is Walter Brodus' question, and the reason I delayed that, went to Seneca Nero's question first, was to give me more time to check my own analysis versus a couple of other people's. And it seems that we all have roughly the same ideas, so I'm quite happy with saying what I'm going to say. What are the Russians going to get where are the Russians going to get a base to replace Syria? So if they lose Tartus, where would they get where do they base? The options are going to be Algeria or Libya. Algeria is not necessarily the most reliable ally, and Libya is not the most necessarily most functional state or reliable ally. But those are their options. They have quite a large mercenary force sitting in Libya. So in some regards, Libya is probably easier to secure than Algeria. But reality is, whatever base they get is not going to be as good as Tartus for them. It's not going to be as solid as Tartus was. It's not going to be connected to as stable a regime, as supportive a regime as Tartus was. It's not going to be the same. So they might get something, but they also might not get anything at all. Poseidon 7307. So suppose Prince of Wales doesn't suffer a prop shaft torpedo hit. How might a surviving the strike change events in coming weeks in the summer 1941? Well, if she survives, then the odds are Repulse also survives, because, don't take this the wrong way, one of the reasons why Repulse is caught is because she's trying to assist Prince of Wales. So, if they're both manoeuvring freely, then the odds are both survive. If both survive, then instead of British forming the Eastern Fleet up in the Indian Ocean, they're going to be forming it up on them. And that's going to change things for starters. If there's those ships around, it also has an effect on things like Singapore, like the attack in Malaya. As I talked about when I talked about Singapore again and the defense of Singapore, I talked about how the Japanese have to use coast roads for their advances. And if you have capital ships in that region and are able to bombard those coast roads and are comfortable doing it, you can cause massive problems for the Japanese logistically. They already have weak logistics. There is the old, often quoted fact that when the British surrender, the Japanese have run out of food, they've pretty much run out of water, and they are down to minimal ammunition. They really are a absolute paper tiger. But the fact is, they're able to fake it, and the British, despite they're sitting on tons of supplies, they're basically defeated. They're psychologically defeated, even if not physically defeated yet. Mostly because they let the Japanese take control of the reservoir. They didn't post any forces around to guard the reservoir. That was on the British. That is entirely a British failing. Okay, I'm not making any claims that are otherwise. But the thing is, if you've got capital ships around, they're going to go up and shell those systems. They're going to shell the coastal roads. They're going to provide support to forces trying to defend the coastal roads. They're probably going to launch out further sorties to try and attack things. And there's more forces going to be grouped around them, and they might well get their carry and other things, in which case they become a very, very scary striking force. And potentially Singapore doesn't fall. And if Singapore doesn't fall, then a lot of the Dutch East Indies might not fall as they did historically, because they're far more easily able to be supported. And also the Japanese have to wait for far heavier forces to show up to be able to attack them properly. And they committed a rather large amount of their forces to the Kido Batai's attack on Pearl Harbor, and they only have so much forces able to go round. And also you provide a force which basically everyone's going to be grouping in on. And that's the thing. Instead of you having a force which is based on whatever we have, you actually have a kernel to build a force around. And that's going to change it. But, yeah. What does everyone else think?
Yeah, I mean, the main Japanese attack was down the west coast of Malaya. So, an awful lot of that is going to be within naval gunfire support range.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would take all that long to get Hermes across to provide additional cover when you realise what's going on. And kind of can try and pull more ships across. And things. And yeah, as it becomes a focus for things to coalesce that are going to really put a monkey wrench in Japanese plans, because they've got 2 Congos with the forces in the South China Sea. They cannot stand up to Repulse and Prince of Wales.
Yeah.
And be sufficiently sure of winning.
Let's be honest, their advantage their cruisers have versus the Allied cruisers are wiped out by the presence of Prince of Wales, let alone Prince of Wales and Repulse. Prince of Wales with her 10, 14-inch guns and 20 knots of speed can decimate their cruiser forces if they try and get in firing range of her.
But more importantly, she can tank a few 14-inch shells from the Congos.
Oh yeah, you do not want to be the Congos trying to engage that kind of that asset. And as I said, she won't be on her own for long. The odds of Warspite and other things turning up is very high with the war actually beginning.
Yeah, and you've got the Australians able to move north quickly, and they've got a better reason to. There is an array of ships around in the Indian Ocean and things. And
Foxhound, no, the US would not be keen to get 4C repulse for a 5-inch gun refit. Because remember, if she's going for a 5-inch refit, she has to be taken out of service, taken across the Pacific, possibly to the Atlantic coast of the United States, if there's for where there's dry dock space, and out of service for months as they take out the guns, recycle the magazines, and put in new guns. There is going to be no desire to do a refit, not until a point in the war when, frankly, repulse is probably going to be being replaced in the service by more King George V's. And that's the thing also, it's a very different scenario because you have basically a British-led fleet on one side and an American-led fleet on the other side, and probably of the Pacific campaign. And probably American ships are in the British-led force, and as part of that. But again, the British will probably be trying to provide, instead of the Eastern Fleet being the fleet in the Indian Ocean and being the Allied force in the Indian Ocean, the Eastern Fleet would be a force based out of Singapore in that area, and that's going to be a different scenario.
Mm-hmm. It will be good.
Yeah.
From the Allied point of view.
I mean, there's also some bigger there things being kind of missed.
Yeah.
If Singapore doesn't fall, or even if it's delayed falling by 4 or 5 months, as the Japanese secure the land forces to come south again.
Yeah.
And the Thai military mobilizes. You're still dealing with the fact that you're not going to have a Burma campaign, or a much more limited Burma campaign. And you've given the British Indian Army enough time to get its stuff together in the east.
Yeah.
That you're not going to get the lightning blades into Burma.
They're going to be, that force is going to be moving through Burma and coming from Burma. The Indian Army is the British Indian Army is going to be on the move, and that's going to be a big problem to any attack on Singapore.
Yeah.
Let me
finish for one.
Oh, sorry.
It doesn't turn India into a massive liability. Because you don't get the collapse of the Indian agricultural system.
You also don't have to do.
That person.
You don't have to do an invasion. You don't have to do an invasion of Madagascar.
Yeah.
Because you think about Madagascar's invaded purely to stop the Japanese reaching it and turning it into a Japanese colony in the Indian Ocean. If you've still got Singapore, you can keep the Japanese Navy is very much not going to be in the Indian Ocean. So you also don't have the problem with Japanese submarines and things coming in the Indian Ocean and all those issues. You can basically push back as hard as you like.
Yeah, and you're not having to, in the midst of 41 and 42, massively strengthen the garrison of British East Africa.
Mm.
And those are the very effective African troops who go on to do very well under Slim in the Burma campaign.
Yeah, so they possibly get moved to Burma earlier. So you're dealing with probably a far larger force turning up in Burma a lot earlier, and that's going to mean that I think it's very unlikely Singapore falls on that scenario, because the Japanese are going to be going, well, yes, we'd like to take Singapore, but we've got this massive, great big army coming out of Burma we have to deal with first.
They still got the infrastructure issue out of Burma.
Yeah.
But, because I'm not thinking of the shipping access, if you're not having the Bay of Bengal interdicted.
Yeah.
So ports like Calcutta and Rangoon reopen, but don't get closed.
Yeah.
I would also flag that, from what I understand of the Singapore campaign, the IJA is on, to say, a shoestring by the time they reach Singapore and the notional outer ring of defenses is probably insulting to shoestrings. So if you manage to rebuff that force and have shore bombardment from capital grade guns, does Japan then have to write off all of those fairly competent jungle troops, either due to disease, death, or starvation?
You got the Thai army. which is going to come up.
Yeah. It'll be a very different, and also you possibly it's going to be an interesting. It will be a very interesting experience to watch that kind of campaign. Those two ships survive. They have a lot of record because also you end up with Tom Phillips out there from early on. He's a senior enough admiral, senior enough commander that things become interesting about who's the area commander. Also, there's always a possibility that you send an admiral of the fleet out there to take command.
Well, the other
The British can usually
thing
find
is,
one or two of them.
also having spent the first 2 years or more putting up with Churchill, Tom Phillips is going to be one of the people who is able to probably cope with MacArthur's ego and tell him to bog off.
Oh yeah, there's a few people around who can do that. 1961. If the Royal Navy had a 170-gun, 4-deck first-rate ship of the line in service, why would she likely be going into ordinary other than due to crew requirements and everything? Usually she'd go into ordinary for maintenance. Normally she'd probably be sitting as the Mediterranean flagship. If you have that sort of thing, having it wander around the Mediterranean as flagship is probably pretty useful.
That reminds me of a quick.
Yeah.
If the Royal and Captain
You're breaking up, Foxo.
Okay. When Foxo comes back, we'll answer a question. Until then, Stafford. Would the Royal Navy benefit from joining the Royal Navy Type 83 or USN Defiant future cruiser programs, and why not? Probably not. Because what the USN is looking for in terms of Defiant is a massive nuclear-powered cruiser / what they're calling a battleship, because that might get through Congress. It might not. Let's be honest, it's going to be fun politics either way. It'll be fun to watch. But for the Royal Navy, at the moment, the Type 83 program is theoretically dead, but all the systems and all the stuff which was being developed under its auspices is actually carrying on getting funding and being developed. The only thing that's dead is the idea of putting them in a large surface combatant, which wasn't going to be decided until about 2035 anyway, so we'll see what happens. As I've said before when discussing that, it's a case of a government has made a decision about funding something which was A, not going to be really relevant in terms of funding for at least another 5, if not 10 years, and B, two general elections away. Let's see what happens.
Now I've got better signal.
Carry on, Foxer.
If the Royal Navy had a captured Santissima Trinidad,
Yeah.
what would they have done with her?
Probably, if they're being sensible, they would have
Raided her up and down the Spanish coast, going nah 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 nah.
something like that. But
Oh, sorry, you said sensible, not.
yeah. What's it called? The R word.
Rosé.
Razade her. Razade were if they're being sensible.
Thought so.
Because then they would
Would make-
have a good reason for cutting her down, and actually she could be quite a good ship if you cut off 2 decks of her. She'd be a very heavily armed Razade. And I think the staff has actually mentioned that would the RCN benefit from joining? No. Maybe the Type 83 once it gets going, but at the moment it's not working. The Defiant program is definitely not for the Royal Navy, so no. Basically, they go for the Royal Navy's 83 if it's back on, and if they need something which is going to be more of a command ship than they actually have, and honestly almost be better off going for a Trieste then, something like based on that.
I'm just having a moment trying to picture the look on some of the Americans' faces when they learn that the Royal Navy are sending some Razes after their heavy frigates. Then Santissima Trinidad turns up.
That is literally what the Royal Navy did. They sent the Americans went, we have heavy frigates. The Royal Navy went, we have Razzes.
Yes, but you're sending a Razzie that's probably still a second rate.
Not quite. Low end third rate. Carl Gasberg. Is low, mid, high level air defense destroyer decided by how many targets it can actually fire upon simultaneously? To an extent, but also depth of magazine. And yeah, depth of magazine pretty much. And whether or not it can deal with satellites and space-based problems as well.
And also, the range and kind of the size of task group it can provide cover for, because low is really yourself and maybe a few things that are close to you. Medium's going to be bigger than that, and high is going to be a large area.
Yeah.
So I think that's another key factor in that. It's the kind of who can you provide cover for.
I believe the line for high end is enforcing the no-fly zone.
Yeah. No, I'm not keen in getting into an argument with people who aren't here to defend themselves, but I would say Fleet's probably right from the point of view of engineering perspective. But in nicest way, she would probably go for a great rebuild, merge as a Razzie, and keep the name going. Because on the status of having the name would be great, it would be far too useful for the Royal Navy to turn it down. So a great refit would be in her future, probably, as a Razzie. And as a Razzie, some bits of her might have been changed. And then, Timu, people's panel's favourite ironclad. Mine is Warrior. I'm going to open the questions up again, because I think we've reached the bottom of them.
Black
I am going to check and find out why the other dog is currently woofing. Because I can currently hear the other one woofing, and I'm just going, why? So another 15 questions? Favourite ironclad, everyone?
HMS Devastation,
Why is Doggy woofing?
1871. Because the fact it has the specialized mastless turret ships. It tells you all you need to know about her.
Not HMS Captain. Yeah, I like Warrior's sister. I feel she gets forgotten about.
It's just the fact that HMS Devastation is the first mastless turret ship. This is the first one that doesn't use sails, right? It's purely steam powered. She's in service. She's only stricken in 1907.
Yeah, I mean, they kept Warrior around for ages as well. I think there was a thought that they'd be useful for, like, trade protection and things. And there was also a fear that you might lose a load of your high-end ships. And so it was kind of the, I don't know what weapons World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with rocks and sticks. And they thought they might get down to that in the middle of a war. Although, frankly, I think trade protection. Because on the high seas, even till quite late, Warrior is probably going to be able to beat up a kind of a colonial corvette or something that somebody might send after your trade.
I suppose it's also a case of the early 20th century was pre-World War One. You also still saw sailing ships going about for actual commercial use. Because you still had the tea clippers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who decided that Going through the Suez Canal was lame. We can do it quicker if we go around the Horn of Africa. And did it quicker.
Yeah, which, let's be honest, was impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I probably would lean towards something like the Admiral class. Or one of the sort of three of the Admirals, Victorias or Trafalgars, because I'm not actually a huge fan of ironclads. I get why they are interesting, but to me, the idea of the more traditional two twin turrets, and then, or even four singles in some cases, and then that fore gun, aft gun just works way better to me. I know there's three bits needed, but they just look so much nicer.
Hello. I have been joined by a poodle who was complaining downstairs that he hadn't come to see you all. So he's come up to see you all. But he's also now trying to get to my bed. He's noticed that he has access to the bed in here. Yeah, I'm not sure where he's going to sit himself down. Yes, he's had one. He's sniffing everything. He's sniffing around happily. He's a poodle.
Kibbles and bits, kibbles and bits. Hello,
Yeah.
kibbles and bits.
Right, so. The audible Discord beep appears not to be Dr. Clarke.
It might be
Okay.
me, but I would have expected.
We'll find out.
I would have thought Thingy would mute itself.
Eventually Discord
that
does
makes
to an extent. For Dragon and Foxer, and actually speaking of that, there's a question back up here which we saved for Dragon earlier. We'll quickly roll to that. We'll quickly roll to the Dragon question. It's got a hand stuck up next to it. Hello, Coach. Yes.
But does it have a potato?
It has a hand raised up in salute. Let's see if we can find it.
A single finger salute?
No, just one suit. I'm fairly sure it was a Knight 6831 question. Because it was about something from World Warships. Yes. Question 16. In World Warships Development Blog 15.7, Tier 9, Respublica was announced based on Gibbs and Cox's 1939 Battleship Design D, if the US built her for the Soviets. What would be the arguments against building her?
Do I need to answer that one later? Why was none of the Gibbs and Cox designs built? They really don't like the idea of giving the Soviet Union warships, especially at that point.
And also,
You might-
they don't like, in a nice way, they're not really that necessarily the greatest warships.
Actually, what's called Respublica is actually a decent one. 10 16-inch guns in 2 triples and 1 quad. The quad's a bit of a weird choice, admittedly.
Yeah, no, let's be
Hey,
honest.
If you just drop that down to a triple, hey, that's not a bad design in general. Because I believe Battleship New Jersey actually were the ones who ended up finding the blueprints for it a while ago.
Mhm.
Political, economic, military, there's so many reasons why you don't build that
Yeah,
for a power that you're not sure is going to be your friends in the next
5
2
years,
years.
let alone
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Because when was the design?
Same sort of age as Kearsarge. So like 44 to sort of as a proper study.
People forget
So
that.
the Soviet Union's not in a state to build it.
No.
Well, this is why the idea is to build it in the US, and using the Soviets will basically buy the ship, and it will be built in the US and transferred over to the Russians.
Mm.
Like how you
No,
buy a
the
ship in Britain.
Americans could use the space to build several more Essex class.
Yeah.
There is a large building slip. No, wait, no. I thought there was one for 10 seconds, but no. There's an Essex class keel being laid on it.
Yeah, it's fun.
No. The Essex class was 3D printed by giant Prusas. You cannot convince me otherwise.
No, you're both wrong. They were all built by aliens because they're too advanced for the Americans to manufacture. So, all American warships post USS Wyoming, all built by aliens. And then people think they exist because they go through the HMS Eldridge process.
Okay.
So they
Yeah.
start appearing
Okay,
on.
let's
So
move
they
on to
start
the next
appearing
question.
on magnetic
Now,
fields.
did the Royal Navy hire these same aliens for the Falklands?
Probably. Question 1951. Question 19 for Dragon of Foxo and panel. If you were to write the following on 2025's Tempesta and Alistair Libertad and the 2027 Azure Lane New Year event, which what would you do? The follow-on.
There you go.
The follow-on to 2025's Tempesta and Islas de Libertad and the 2027 Azure Lane Lunar New Year event, and what would you do? And of course, you know, I think both Dragon and Fox are very uniquely qualified to talk about this, seeing as they are
Actually,
most active of us in Azure Lane.
this is true. I'm basically the active one playing in Foxo. Hasn't touched it in a long time, basically. But there is a small problem with that.
Foxo is active by default, by the fact that you are active, and she listens to you, so she is active by osmosis. You are active.
Right, just because we're discussing a ship girl OC that she's come up with does not mean she's active.
No, I said.
Up.
Please note the phrase I use: active by virtue of osmosis, because of having conversations with you. It's like in the nicest way. My mum would claim she is active in Timberborn at the moment because me and my sister keep debating the methodologies of building different dam structures in Timberborn. And Mum doesn't play Timberborn, but she hears it because she hears us debating it.
Yeah, but it's all mute because I'm playing it again, okay?
I was trying to
I
keep
got
that
the bug
secret
again.
like you
I've
were
got a
saying.
new account. It's been a week and I'm already to level 53 again.
That's because you're just so
quiet.
good at Foxo. We all know this.
But going back to the question, overall, can't actually tell you for Temesta because I didn't bother with the 2025 event because, to be honest, they're just not that interesting. You would think, like, Cthulhu sailing ships would be something interesting. Yet somehow they keep finding more and more ways to make them boring. It's honestly impressive, personally. As Libertad,
Cthulhu sailing ships they're making boring.
Yes.
How do you do that? That takes effort.
As for the Chinese New Year, no clue. See whatever random Vickers Armstrong's designs we can scrounge up. There's that carrier concept. Give them that.
Jack Ray sitting here currently sorting out the website. It's a good thing I'm using the best AI models I can to filter the goofy stuff from the summaries. And I run it through 3 times to add extra no to aliens. Oh. Okay.
Why? Why?
Runon, describe the chaos which would ensure if the US commissioned if the UK commissioned the Jaeger style Pacific Rim style ship battle robot as Warspite. Lord help the world. That is definitely a scenario where the machine spirit overtakes the humans in charge.
I mean, that's going to be automatically classified as what? A level 6?
Yeah. That is a level 6.
It would probably, well, let's be real here. If we're going with in lore, it would probably be a Mark 1 or a Mark 2 that fought like a Mark 6.
Yeah.
Because Jaegers are marks, kaijus are categories.
Is it technically Mark 6? I thought it was Mark 5.
It would be yeah, it's going to be better than Mark 5 though.
So Gypsy was a 3, Crimson was a 3, Striker was a 5 or a 6.
I don't think it was a 6.
Then it was a 5, and Gypsy Avenger was a 6, and then Saber was a 7. in the movie that we wish didn't exist because it was a really, really craptastic movie.
The bots were good. The acting
No.
could have been improved by being a forest.
Yeah. So
The
Striker Yurika was first and last of the Mark Fives. Runon, just checked. There is a couple of Mark Sixes, but they mostly pop up in the film or in Into the Black. The anime. Sorry, so gone.
So let's see. The second movie, the problem with the second movie is that the Jaegers are way the heck too light in the second movie.
Oh yeah. Anyway, Mark Harkness. I'm in a hopeful history where Brewster goes belly up pre-war. What do the Finns buy instead of 239s? Whatever also available is America at the time. If Brewster's gone belly up, then it's the only option is going to be an early version of the Wildcat, which, let's be honest, were not that great. There's the Wildcat pre-losing to the Buffalo, and there's the Wildcat post-losing to the Buffalo. And that's a very different aircraft.
Yeah, it depends what stage Brewster go belly up.
Yes.
Because if they did something like they won the competition, started production, had industrial relations problems and manufacturing problems and quality control problems to the point where the US Navy finds them to the point where they go bust, but Grumman have still been pushed to actually make a better fighter,
Yeah.
then you're getting Wildcats. Because if the timing's just about right, then it's before the US would just take over the company, which later on they did when some of them messed up. And instead they would, they probably kind of let them go to the wall.
Yeah.
Because capitalism. And I don't know that they particularly covered themselves in glory generally. I mean,
they did quite well, actually. The Brewsters did quite well in Finnish service. And you have to remember, again, the Brewsters in Japan, in Malaysia did not do bad. It's just there weren't that many of them, and they're most often remembered for not being there in time for Force Z, and that's because they were not told they were needed for Force Z.
Yeah, and they weren't being flown by particularly experienced pilots. Because you had a handful of kind of Battle of Britain veterans who I believe were getting kind of stymied by a bunch of people who had been pointedly shipped off to the Far East whilst we were fighting the Battle of Britain. And then when things were getting desperate in the Mediterranean, had been kept in the Far East.
I've made this comment already. The nice way that the trouble is there was a lot of people in the Far East who were not exactly even the A or the B team. There's an argument they might not have even been the C team.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, so I think that's part of what hampered the Brewster Buffalo, but the Wildcat, particularly actually for Finnish service, would go well because the early Wildcats didn't have the folding wings. So that's why the Royal Navy couldn't use them on carriers particularly.
But they could.
But you could use them on land perfectly well. And actually, I think the wing folding mechanism and a few other bits and pieces, I was just reading about this, made them quite a bit heavier. Which only got reversed when you got to the FM2, which was the slightly improved General Motors version.
Walter, the thing is, you're asking the question, why do people keep trying to put lipstick on this pig? The thing is, the Brewster Buffalo doesn't win the competition because it's a bad aircraft. And the ones which actually entered service and which had got into service were actually pretty darn good. The aircraft was actually not that bad. The company building the aircraft was what was the problem. The aircraft for its time was not the worst aircraft in the world by a long shot, and there's a reason it won the competition versus the first generations of Wildcat. But it's what behind it that's the problem.
Yeah, there were substantially worse aircraft being developed around that sort of time.
Yeah.
It's just it was also a transitional time, and you had the problem of you had very good Japanese pilots who knew what they were doing against pilots who were not as good in the sense that they were not as experienced. No idea what their raw talent would have been, not comment on them, just they hadn't got the training and things. And didn't know how to beat the Zero at that point, so they lost. But
Bruce managed to screw up everything. As I said, they screwed up Corsairs. They were instructed to build everything. It's the company more than the aircraft. The aircraft is actually quite an interesting aircraft. Sadu, and now I'm getting interesting people make comments about how the LCS is apparently severe to the Type 55. Severe?
Victoria?
Sadu, can you clarify this one? Severe? Can you please clarify this one? What you mean? Because I'm not sure if that's the right word.
He was saying something earlier about the USN getting bounced by PLN if they ever went head to head.
Look, in a scenario where someone was suggesting it would be LCS versus an LCS wrapped around a tanker against the Chinese battle group, then yes, the nicest way, if there's no Arleigh Burkes and no carriers there, and it's just the LCS and a tanker, let's say 5 or 6 LCS and tanker versus a Chinese carrier battle group, then I'm sorry, the Chinese carrier battle group probably does win that. From the sheer fact that the LCS group is going to run out of missiles long before the Chinese are going to. That's the simple fact. Look, is it going to be necessarily an easy fight? No, I'm sure the Americans have some pretty cool weapon systems. They'll do something, but that's not what the LCS was built for. The LCS was not built for those kinds of heavy duty fights in that scenario, that peer on peer conflict. It's supposed to be superior. Your speech is tech correct. No, the LCS is not superior to the Type 55. The LCS is a small combatant with some interesting capabilities, which was undermined by some very interesting design choices, but voiced on it by various people with bright ideas. And the Type 55 is basically a cruiser masquerading as a large destroyer. They are built for different roles, different missions, and in the nicest way, in a one-on-one fight, my money would be on the Type 55, purely because it's going to run out of missiles last. Unless we're presuming that the Chinese missiles are a lot worse than the American ones. And the thing is, that may be true, it may not be true, we don't know until you're actually in a fighting scenario between them. And so you never, in planning assumptions, assume that your enemy's weapon systems are terrible compared to your own. You presume they are equivalent.
Yeah.
Foxhound, don't some LCS only have Hellfire for energy at work? Yes, this was the point I was trying to make. Yeah. They are very different vessels. If you're comparing like for like, you're taking a Burke versus a 52. Stafford, what would make a modern, what would a modern Oliver Hazard Perry look like if the USM was locked in a room and they told they had to build a new version of this? Would it be slightly longer or broader, or just a carbon copy? Probably both, longer and broader, because it's got to be adapted to operate with VLS systems and various other things have got to be worked out. But as I said before, theoretically you could do it, but although there does seem to be a vogue amongst people to be rude about the OHP and go, wow, it didn't have the survivability, it wasn't this, and you sit there and go, no, it was a frigate designed to provide numbers as cheaply and as massively as possible. It was not as good as it was not as good as some of the other the destroyer level escorts which were built for the anti-submarine role in terms of survivability and those things. It wasn't. But it wasn't supposed to be. That's putting it on a benchmark which it wasn't supposed to stand up for.
Wait. Are you trying to tell me that a small ship built to a more limited capability is less capable than a larger ship built to a higher end capability?
Yeah.
In domains which it's not optimized for? I mean, that's just an outrageous accusation, and I feel you should retract that immediately.
Doc, I really don't like what you just told us, that we can't expect a light cruiser like an Omaha to go toe to toe with Yamato and win. I mean, come on, man.
I mean, as I said,
not every ship is HMS Seek taking on. I think it was Vittorio Veneto, wasn't it? Not Littorio. Yeah.
Well,
but those are Royal Navy battleships, and they're cruisers, and they're. Yeah.
That was a Royal Navy Tribal class destroyer versus an Italian battleship.
And as I said...
and even then, he didn't sink it, he just drove it off.
as I said in the message before, earlier, in the Ship Shape group, which had pictures of the bow of HMS King George V after she ran over HMS Punjabi, another tribal class, and then managed to damage not only King George V but also Washington, which was following behind with her depth charges. The mistake made by Punjabi was trying to take on two fast battleships at the same time. She should have gone after them one after the other, and then it would have been fine, and she would have, I'm sure, managed it.
Yeah.
Because private class destroyers know no fear and don't understand scale.
No. But yeah, it'll be a fun thing. What is an AC-75 RSM? What is the panel's favourite Cold War incident? That should be. Are there ones that should be talked about more? I think the sheer number of times submarines actually bash into each other is quite an interesting one to me.
Yeah, but we don't know enough about most of those.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's why I wish they'd be talked about more, so we'd hear more about how they bashed into each other. Also, it would stop this idea that submarines are somehow invincible, hopefully hanging on, because I get fed up with being told that no one can fight submarines, that they are just going to sweep modern walls, and you sit there and go, no, they're going to be dominant. They're a dominant factor, certainly. They are a crucial factor, but they are not invincible.
It's when you have...
Unfortunately, they're all downstairs, Big Fluff. They're all downstairs. You can make as much of a as you like, but they're all downstairs.
It's I'm
sorry, I have to go get a biscuit for a poodle, but I'll leave you all quickly discussing it. But if I don't, I'm going to be in trouble.
It's the supposed SSBNs that bump into each other because they both like the look of the same bit of deep, anonymous ocean. And it's kind of hole in the water meets hole in the water. That I find particularly amusing with that one. But I like Whiskey on the Rocks, partly just because it's an awesome name. What
is that one?
That is when a Soviet whiskey-class submarine got stranded on some rocks well inside Swedish territorial waters.
While being armed with nuclear weapons.
Hmm.
I mean, I think...
Go ahead, Foxa.
Go on.
My favorite, I think this is Cold War, it may be post-Cold War, but I think it's Cold War, is the I have never confirmed the. I think it is the Swedes. It's the Swedes or the Finns playing on their hydrophones in their fjords. If you're gay, sail this way, or something to that effect. That acted as an effective deterrent towards Russian submariners going up said fjords.
Ah,
It
I mean,
feels more like something the Finns would do.
yeah. I mean,
We
my
have lost a
favorite
poodle.
part, and it's more Cold War in general, is the amount of time everyone just goes around yoinking everything.
Mm-hmm.
You have the British in Greece covertly buying tanks off the Bulgarians.
We also do fun things in other parts of the world as well.
You've got the American feeling BMPs.
Yes.
You've got that time the Soviets stole a chieftain.
Yes.
You get the various escapes from North Korea and the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that sort of... Nations are kleptomaniacs.
Yeah.
You leave summer unattended for 5 minutes. And someone's whisked it away.
No. I licked it, therefore it's mine.
Yeah.
I also do love the chicken-based thermal protection system.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. If anyone wants more fun, me and Gareth the Brit have a whole series of videos for his Untitled podcast, which basically are backups if other people don't show up, that he and I will record. Because usually I'm quite capable of adjusting my schedule if Gareth needs me to, because he's a good friend. And I have that policy with Shipshape Crew, I tend to adjust my schedules for them. And it's a case of... One of them, I think, is on random stuff which was stolen by landing craft during the Cold War. Because the Royal Navy got very good with the Royal Marines of having a landing craft somehow sneak into your territory, sidle up to one of your beaches, put its ramp down, and a vehicle drive onto it, and then it go away. With said vehicle aboard.
Listen, they said they could park there. No one had the heart to tell them that their parking spot may have moved by the time they get back.
Yeah, that's how we got whole tanks out of countries which we weren't even supposed to. The landing craft wasn't even given permission to enter that particular part of water.
Well, you know,
And
sometimes you get lost.
here's the thing was really that we tended to do it in broad daylight because otherwise it's kind of difficult to approach a landing craft to a beach without having a beach team ashore, and you didn't want to put anyone ashore.
I mean,
Well, yes.
you know, sometimes you're sailing along and you take the right instead of the left at Albuquerque, and you just find yourself on a Soviet-aligned beach with a BMP right in front of you. It would be rude not to lower the ramp and see if you can trade some whiskey and cigarettes for some vodka.
I think it was a
come on,
T-72
man.
main battle tank.
Yeah,
Okay, all right. T-72.
yeah.
Go
Because
ahead,
the
Fox.
BMP's even funnier.
Yes.
The BMP was, okay, get a crew across to it, and just get it across the river. Once it's across the river, it's fine, it starts.
Yeah.
And apparently, the guy who was in command of the unit parked his BMP by a river. For those of you that don't know, the BMP is amphibious.
I think this was a Cold War story, civilian side of things, but a Cold War story nonetheless, where somebody stole like a Cessna 150 or similar scale plane, and then just flew it. I forget which way they flew it, but they flew it basically across enemy lines. and just landed in the middle of somebody's city.
No,
I
I
think
think
that was
of the
really
time
cool.
a Cessna pilot flew a Cessna through the Warsaw Pact and landed it on Red Square and got arrested.
Yes.
No, it's like the Swedes there. The use of their ASW deterrent. What was it? They actually have music. They have. They actually have something broadcasting underwater because they were told they were told the Navy was told they couldn't use active means to deter the Russians who kept coming into their waters, and so the Navy decided to use passive means, which was basically come this way if you're gay.
Yeah,
And
I mentioned that earlier.
That stopped the Russian submarines from going into their waters.
Which is really kind of sad when your whole armed forces can just be defeated by alleging homosexuality. I mean, they call me a snowflake,
it's
but
basically it's going back to primary school days. You know, it's great.
yeah, but I mean,
It's also a very cheap method of deterrence.
people like to call my cohort of individuals snowflakes, and yet I wouldn't exist if I was on a mission as a military officer and I just heard, yeah, come this way if you're cishet. Okay, don't care. I am a human on a mission.
All right, next question. Lions. If the Japanese don't take Singapore, how do they fare without the oil source that are there, and how does it affect the war? It actually has a big impact on things, especially on ship operations. It's not just the oils in Singapore; it's the oil in Malaya and other places, Rangoon, etc., that they take. If they don't take those oil facilities, they are in actual some trouble when it comes to operations. There is a huge amount of oil there. It also makes it a lot easier for the Allies, honestly, because in a nice way, one of the things that people tend to go is, how you supply oil to Singapore if it's in this scenario? And I tend to go, well, Singapore actually has enough oil to sustain an entire British fleet operating in theatre for about a year and a half. And when we say entire British fleet, I'm talking something along the lines of 15 capital ships, 40 cruisers, 5 aircraft carriers, and the destroyer flotillas and submarine flotillas to support all of that force.
So what you mean is they had the Royal Navy had what they considered the bare minimum amount of oil, and were scared that it was way too little.
Sorry,
yes,
I need to barge in with my mod hat on here. Sadu, you know better. You've been in this chat enough. Come on, man. It's funny, but just not fit for this chat. Go over to Fleet. We can eat that crap up over Fleet.
Yeah.
Come on, man. You know better.
Aurora Flinks. Do you believe the power of drones and helicopters are on land, and how do you believe that will translate into arming ships and will air power become dominated by fighters similar to 1940s again? I think that things are going to be more complicated than a lot of the current prophets are suggesting. I think when I'm looking at things which are fulfilling attack helicopter roles in future, I'm looking at drones, but I'm wondering if they're going to be forward controlled from other helicopters. Instead of you having the attack helicopter being an Apache style thing, it's a Lynx style thing, very fast, slightly larger helicopter which has forward air control and is controlling 6 to 8 smaller rotary UCAVs which are doing a strike. I also think I keep looking at what's going on in Ukraine, and some people do a one-for-one transfer of technologies across, and I don't tend to do that because I presume both sides will learn the lessons from Ukraine, and so what might be working at the moment might not work then. There's also the scenario that people go, well, hang on, these drones are dominating the Russian Navy at the moment. They are, but how much funding is the Russian Navy actually getting to defend themselves against the drones, or set it up? If you look at it, all the money seems to be heading towards the army, which is kind of natural at this point, because the Navy's, unless you're going to do an amphibious operation, which they don't seem to be planning to do at any point soon, the Navy's kind of not the focus of the funding. It's going on the Air Force, it's going on the army. I'd also say there are some interesting things when it comes into the drone stuff, in that I think when it comes to arming ships and talking about ships, I think again, to my mind, every ship is going to become really a task unit. Every crewed ship with uncrewed ships and uncrewed aviation assets with it. I think carriers are going to be the center points of massive groups of uncrewed aviation assets and crewed aviation assets. Because again, I think what we're going to see, at least in the next 20 to 30 years, maybe even longer than that, but we'll see how it works out. It's going to depend on computing power and how much we trust things, is a lot of human crewed, uncrewed partnerships and hybrid operations and hybrid capabilities. I don't think it's going to go all one way or all the other way. I am a bit worried with how some people are approaching that, though. Because there is a saying, God helps best those who help themselves. Standing around waiting for God to bless you with talents, or bless you with a miracle, you're less likely to get something than if you are actively working towards getting that miracle, working towards finding a solution yourself. I would say if you are more likely to find success in a crewed, uncrewed partnership, if let's say in ASW warfare you are a Type 26, which is a first rank ASW vessel itself, crewed up with ASW hunting vessels, than you are if you were a river class patrol vessel. I'm talking about the OPV, crewed up with those same vessels hunting submarines. It's a case of you need to be fit to lead your group. This is where I have some issues coming up with the Common Command Vessel, CCV, all the sorts of various concepts which are coming out for what is basically a rebranded Type 32, because it was originally, that's basically what the Type 32 was originally planned to be, a control ship for drones and uncrewed assets to operate with task groups. So we'll see what happens in that scenario, because I'm kind of watching that with a lot of attention, because if it's just literally a command ship and not really capable of doing anything other than command and self-defense, then it's probably not going to be as successful as something which is actually capable of fighting itself. Jane the
we will be
Mentalist.
able to solve all these problems with advanced compute power, right?
Potentially. Potentially. Jane the Mentalist. Was it possible for Britain to keep building the tribals leading into World War II? At least another dozen, maybe two. They were pretty much doing that. They were building them for the Australians and the Canadians. The British aren't building them for themselves because they are trying to churn out about a dozen other types of destroyer at the same time. And sloops. But the more tribals would have been useful, but they were also trying to get the new 4.5. They were also kind of waiting to do the next generation of tribals till the 4.5-inch guns design mount was made.
And they'd also got the 4.7-inch 50, which was used on the L&M class and used a different shell.
Yeah. There was a larger L design which would have been far more useful. Foxhound, I've talked to some guys who are in Ukraine right now and they are a bit concerned about our drones will do everything. Yeah, most people I've talked to in Ukraine are similarly inclined. We'll see what happens.
You're fine, right?
Alright, so 968 everyone. Which Royal Navy Admiral might be best to handle the Azur Lane HMS event? That being the Pledge of the Radiant Court, aka the race to save Hood from dying due to the Black Cube, revelations of dust, and there's a part 2 to this. Anyone know where the part 2 is?
Had to get me while I'm trying to paint minis for Art Fight.
Well, whilst we're waiting for that, I'll do Steve's question. Following the River Class Batch 2, I'm presuming this is the OPVs. Should this be in the 3,000 ton range of size to increase capability? I would hope so, but we'll see what actually happens, if anything actually happens on that, because so far everyone keeps jumping around with the various options for it. And Jonathan Moon, you're offered the position of a recently recovered shipwreck. Would you take the job? And what ship would you want to be? Think along the lines of Vassar and Mary-Rose. Probably not. I would probably recommend someone who's far more of an Aegis sail specialist than me. I am a naval historian, so by the fact naval historians usually have to be generous because there aren't enough of us to teach to focus in on specific areas. We usually have to cover the whole gamut. But let's be honest, as a naval historian, I would say most of my work and most of my efforts do tend to focus on things which have engines in them. I do enjoy doing the Age of Sail stuff. I really enjoy the Roman stuff, so if it was a Roman one, I might well go for it, but I'd probably suggest Simon Elliott before me, because he's an archaeologist and he's a Roman naval historian first and foremost. But again, like me, he's a bit of a generalist. So if it was Age of Sail, I'd probably be suggesting someone like Kate Jameson, because again, it's more her or Sam Willis or something like that. They're focused than mine. Which is probably where I'm stupid, and I do get told off occasionally by people, because I'm very good at recommending other people for jobs that are offered to me. And going, no, this person will be better than me.
I think more importantly, the type of ship, what I'd really like to find is a kind of perfectly preserved, in probably the Black Sea being realistic, Trimarine.
Or I'll check the photos.
I think that would probably be the best thing to find. Anyone else got anything? Because I can't think of any big name ships that are still lost, which would really have a massive impact, like Vassar and Mary Rose. Anyone else?
Did they find Captain?
Possibly. Drax the one who knows about that one.
I'm trying to remember what she's called. But I remember from a couple of years back reading about a Spanish galleon that went down.
On.
And she was carrying gold and platinum, but that wasn't the interesting thing, I think, in the modern day that she was carrying. But she was apparently, according from what I've read, written accounts and translation of how the pre-colonial Mayan written language worked. A lexical for translating it into period Spanish. And even if, because those are going to be long gone by now, but if you could find where she was, I think it would just be interesting. Just to know that we came a bit close to actually knowing.
Given some of what I've seen, it's really expensive to do, of course, because of course it is. But depending upon how the artifacts are found, there's been some really interesting work with MRIs and other radiological instruments to start and LLMs, admit it, to try and read books while they're closed, because if you open them, they'll just turn to mush.
I think it's CT scanning they're doing it with, rather than MRI, but I could be wrong on that.
Archaeology is not a really closely followed field of mine. So I am not surprised that I would get something
No,
incorrect.
so I don't really understand MRI scanners. But my understanding is they basically pull hydrogen ions from in water out of position with the magnet and then let them go, and then the letting them go releases energy, and that's what is then detected. And so you've got kind of a giant magnet that spins round and a detector that picks up where the other stuff is. The CT scanner's just a load of X-rays being fired. And kind of then using computers to kind of reconstruct what you get from doing a whole load of very fine slices or whatever. So you can, and one of the problems you have with doing these things on humans, because the limiting factor with MRI scanners, I think, seems to be the strength of the magnets, and they talk about them in terms of how many Tesla they are, which I don't understand. But the CT scanner, it's partly about how much radiation you're exposing somebody to. And so you can just increase the amount of information potentially by just upping the radiation dose by just scanning it for longer, so gathering more data. And then the other big limiting factor has been the kind of around the sensitivity of the receptors and the computing power, and that's also going up hugely. So, yeah.
Better fidelity scans are always useful, but they come with a trade-off. 9681, which Royal Navy Admiral might be best to handle these as a lane of HMS event? And that being the Pledge of the Radiant Court, aka the race to save Hood from dying due to the Black Cube, Revelations of the Dust, aka fighting concepts of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and A Rose on the High Tower, aka trying to save Glorious Meta's timeline from the X event, even through Glorious Meta's timeline is doomed in the end. I'm probably going to go for Cunningham. He's a balance of a fighting admiral and a strategist.
I don't think there's anyone historically that's kitted out to fight that sort of campaign. Politely.
I sort of agree with you, but I was going for who is the least worst option.
Yeah. And who is willing to go, well,
let's
ball
ball
torpedoes, let's do it anyway.
And your options are probably Vian or Cunningham, perhaps Nelson, but Nelson probably going, what the friggate's going on here, would have no frame of reference on most of those ships. So you're left with someone from the 20s and 30s, and that means you're left with realistically 2 or 3 options. And I would say Cunningham has probably got an edge on this one than Vian. Because Cunningham's actually prepared to do paperwork, whereas Vian actively tries to avoid it.
I would just like to highlight that our resident war criminal, Stafford, has endorsed my suggestion of Jaeger Warspite being piloted by Gurkhas.
Okay, can we please stop suggesting things which are likely to cause issues? Stafford Thompson, Warspite is coming back as an SBN. How worried should the world be if the Royal Navy brings back Tiger, Repulsor, and Renown as surface combatants along with Swarm of Flowers for escorts? If the Royal Navy starts ordering Flower-class vessels, that's usually code for there's going to be a major war soon. It's kind of like if the Germans start fitting out an 88mm. Please, no one look at what gun types were recently tested by the German which company is it? Is Rheinmetall? I think it was. They did some interesting testing, and it's when sort of
the Dutch are vaguely talking about buying some big ships. Wait,
yes, they are currently talking about buying some big ships, and when the French are talking about buying a new generation of torpedoes. And usually planning the next generation of aircraft carrier, all these things. Yeah, that's usually when you have to start watching out for things. Nightwolf. To our best knowledge, is there any footage of the wreck of World War II aircraft carrier HMS Ark Royal? I think there isn't there.
Think so, but the dives were a while ago, so it's not going to be as good as most of the other stuff.
Yeah, it's a pretty old footage, but they were I think they were done. I seem to remember in the book Ark Royal there's some stills from the dive videos.
Let's send them into an environment where the iron in their blood is getting ripped out of their bodies. Are you talking about an MRI?
Close. It's either that or it's the
I think he is, based on his last message. Sadu, if you have a malfunctioning MRI scanner that won't shut off, and you for some reason have to shut it off, without regard to the continued existence of said MRI scanner, just shoot it. It will cause a helium leak, which will then quench the magnet, and you will now have an extremely expensive lump of inert electronics.
Yep. How good did the US Navy have any plans for a new US Naval frigate at the end of the Cold War? Yes, it's called the NFR-90. It was supposed to be the NATO Joint Frigate Program. And it was basically wrecked by various people by trying to include too many different nations who wanted too many different things.
And to the MRI point, there's also the I guess I wanted a new job anyway button, usually located outside of the MRI's sphere of influence, which releases the helium and quenches the magnet.
Yeah. What was it that short I saw years ago, which was was about a gentleman who'd had a let's put it this way, his primary fun organs had been metallically enhanced.
Yes.
And I think it was some billing specialist had told him he needed a full MRI without consulting any of the medical professionals. And when the medical professionals found out, they calmly informed the billing professional that she was about to be sued.
There has also been a incident where a allegedly 100% non-ferrous how do I render this into legalese?
Are you referring to that certain incident that had doctors questioning?
Matter expulsion device
Yes,
actually had a ferrous core in it, and when the patient went into the MRI, the ferrous core then proceeded to take the quickest possible route to the magnetic source.
Actually, as I recall, it actually stayed stuck in them.
Yes, it just so happened that the quickest path to magnetic source was through the patient.
Yeah. It also gets...
They won that legal case.
Yeah. It turned out the company that sold it was lying.
Yes, they listed it as 100% non-ferrous. Or I'm being very circumspect because of the code of conduct here on this channel. The individuals a certain age or a certain exposure to the universe will understand exactly what I'm saying.
Just honest.
I'm seeing Dr. Fox's face, and I'm deriving great enjoyment
in
from it.
future scenarios, could I please suggest before any procedure is done, you first ask them permission if they run a magnet over the thing they're going to insert?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Jack Ray, I understand. I wanted to stop this thing as well. Right. If Japan remains democratic allied and Italy neutral because Mussolini didn't care about Hitler, how do you think the UK and Ireland handle World War II? There's just Germany and small friends, including war costs. It's going to be very different. Because if Italy doesn't get involved, then Germany's south, then the Mediterranean doesn't become a war zone. So that means the British can basically focus whatever the assets they want from the from Mediterranean and the Atlantic on the war operation. If France is knocked out as historically still, it's still going to be an issue. But basically, in simple terms, the Med fleet probably does a tour and takes out the French fleet. Probably what happens at Meza Kabir also possibly happens at Toulon and a few other scenarios. Or alternatively, they decide to flee to the Allies. Or alternatively, because they're not being invaded by Italy as well, and they don't have to deal with that problem, the French actually don't collapse in the same way they did historically. It's a scenario that is interesting. If you have Japan, Democrat, and Allied, then you've got those resources coming through. You've got Italy neutral, so you don't have to worry about the Mediterranean and Far East. You can basically focus everything on Germany, etc. And suddenly the resources you have available are dramatically increased because you have the modernized Queen Elizabeth available to back up the forces in the forces in the North Sea and facing the Germans. So if you have a Denmark Strait scenario, there's going to be another couple of carriers out there. There's also not going to be the losses taken of carriers or vessels damaged fighting in the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean was a far more costly theatre than the Battle Atlantic was for the British in terms of major capital assets. So you have those carriers, you have those capital ships available. That's going to mean things like the Denmark Strait. Honestly, the reality is you are probably going to have, with the carrier group hanging around with them, it's probably going to be the fast Queen Elizabeths, and you're probably going to have the faster capital force, maybe Renown, Hood, Prince of Wales, and King George V. In which case, it's a case of, hello, Bismarck, Prince Jürgen. So good to see you. Have you met our friends? There are now 20 14-inch guns and 14 15-inch guns targeted on you. Enjoy.
And if you just wait a moment, there'll be some 16-inch guns along, but
they probably won't get here in time.
Yeah.
They will keep trying, though.
Yeah.
And you'll also have access to the economic assets in the Far East and India that get tied up in, supporting India after its agricultural system collapses and not losing Malaya's rubber. So you get a healthier war economy.
The sterling area in Malaysia probably does its job and stops the British economy becoming quite so impacted by World War II in terms of economic factors. You have a lot more. You have the ability for Britain to take loans from the Dominions far more easily. You have Australia and New Zealand far happier with sending resources that way. Let's be honest, they're not affected, but they're not impactable. They're just growing their economies, and you probably find yourself, if you're Germany, dealing with a scenario where even if France has fallen, the British are nowhere near as stretched as they were historically. Nowhere near as much stretch as they were historically.
Yeah.
And there are resources facing you, and you're in trouble with those resources.
You might actually get the invasion of Ireland, though.
By who?
You might get an attempted invasion of Ireland.
Yeah, so, an invasion of the Republic of Ireland by the British. Because after the fall of France, the Irish government reopened diplomacy with Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
And there's attempts by the Irish far right to get Nazi support for retaking Northern Ireland, which leads to the British going, okay, you tried that, we invade you.
Yeah.
And historically that didn't happen because those troops were needed in North Africa. And Ireland remained a liability until 43. But if you've got the troops and Ireland's a liability and it's right there.
Would you like an active insurgency 30 miles from your shore? Because I feel like that's how you get an active insurgency 30 miles from your shore.
Because that's a really interesting thing. The Republic of Ireland and previously the Dominion of Ireland did a really, really good job of demilitarizing the Irish population in the 30s. It would definitely have been interesting.
Honestly, Britain probably gets too many soldiers from Ireland to make it worthwhile to improve security.
Oh yeah, because there are a lot of Irish who actually join the British Army.
The number of Irish who served was significant.
And they are treated very badly when they return home by a lot of their fellow citizens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the whole Black Army.
Yeah.
But there was, because what causes it is that the Irish far right, when they reach out to the Nazis, offer bases for U-boats in Southern Ireland. And offer basing in Clarke, which is in a very inopportune place for the British.
It is.
Yeah. So what you might end up with is Cork occupied, but Britain had only given up the base around there in, I think, 38.
Yeah, I think what you probably have, I seem to remember, was if you have smoking gun proof of what the Nazis were going to do, I think the plan probably would be let the Nazis do their initial arrivals, then respond with overwhelming response, and then you've got basically you can point to the Irish government and go, well, you let the Nazis in first, so we had to come protect ourselves. You joined the war on the side of the other side, and the Irish government go, oh, we didn't. It was our far right elements. Doesn't matter. In the nicest way, the moment Nazis land, the moment any U-boat that goes into port and gets caught, the British have casus belli. And legitimate casus belli, which is not going to upset America, because America's going to go, well, we don't like the British invading Ireland, but they were letting the Nazis in behind them, and that the British have already done the same thing to Iceland and other parts of the world. Surely the Irish knew what was coming.
Hey, Gorbian.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Nothing has changed.
Hmm.
You missed an exciting conversation about medical mishaps earlier.
No, we're not restarting that. Knights again, everyone. Follow up to question 15. Why would Admiral Cunningham have to deal with the paperwork from the events of Pledge of the Reigning Court and Dust and Rose on Hightower? Because I cannot imagine any command structure like they have in Ezra Lane does not involve paperwork at certain points. I know you never see it in the gameplay, because probably that part's taken out for make the gameplay more fun, but I can guarantee the commander is having to do a lot of paperwork.
Yes.
Stafford Thompson.
Sign documents regularly.
If the Royal Navy needs new dog boats built, are there firms in the UK get to build modern ones, or would they have to sort of the US for them? No, as I've talked about before, basically you go down to the RNLI and the various people who build various fast boats and fast speedboats and basically go build.
We have a very, very good line of companies that make kind of super yachts and things.
And speedboats, yeah. That's one of the few areas of UK shipbuilding which doesn't get touched a lot, because they do quite a good job, and they are quite quite capable, and they're quite successful. But usually, because they're seen as servicing the needs of the super rich, and be quite wealthy anyway, the British governments tend to, no matter what hue, tend to try and ignore them, and sometimes cause them trouble. But they exist. They're quite good.
And just remember, if you do need dog boats again, pretty much any marina that does fishing boats in the UK will just go meats back on the menu. We
Yeah,
basically build these things from scratch anyway.
yeah. And there are quite a few fishing boat builders as well. There's quite a few of interesting production lines. OMG, hello. Why wasn't there a replacement for the USN S2 tracker? If given the choice, would you cut down P8 buys and purchase a replacement? There was a replacement for the tracker. Oh, that was
Tracker
the
was
Viking model,
replaced-
wasn't it?
Yeah, Tracker was
It's
replaced
by the Viking. The Viking.
It was the S3 Viking that didn't get a replacement. And
Yeah.
That's because Roll was being replaced by helicopters because they now had the range and capability, supposedly, to
Yeah,
do the same job.
it was a theoretical. They were a 70% solution to the scenario offered by the tracker, by the Viking, and it was felt that if you had more helicopters, that was better than taking up the space. Basically, it's the whole thing of you only have a certain amount of space in your hangar, and the larger larger number of aircraft you can, of airframes you can of one type, the more you can generate, more aircraft you can generate from that pool of airframes. So the idea was that having more helicopters was better than having both a helicopter squadron and a Viking squadron. Don't worry, AMG. Don't worry. We worked out your question. Honestly, you need both, though. Honestly, you do need both. Are there a piece of medical equipment that might, damage the ship if things started going wrong? There are lots.
Realistically, an MRI in a proper room is not going to damage the ship unless it has a severe internal electrical fault, which causes some sort of, what was it?
Electromagnetic pulse?
No, you're good. No, because those rooms are in a Faraday cage.
Yes, but you're talking about the land-based equivalents. The ones built into ships are sometimes interesting. I've seen some of the schematics of the ones put into some of the hospital ships.
You're not going to be putting.
Yeah.
You don't want to put an MRI on a ship.
No.
It's very heavy and very niche, and it's not going to change what you do. You want CT scanners. The main problem with the medical kit is a lot of the stuff we like to use is probably best described as being somewhere between very explosive and unbelievably dangerously explosive. Including a lot of the gases and things. Because an awful lot of it would like to go bang. I mean, we use nitrates for things. I mean, you might have less reason to use the nitrates in a war zone. Tends to be more for heart problems and less kind of trauma stuff. But even just things like the oxygen.
Now, one of the
that's going to make firefighting fun.
One of the things that I'm going to explain to poor Dan, which is probably going to worry him, is actually there are quite a lot of MRIs on ships. They're mostly on cruise ships. And it's mostly produced by Hitachi Medical Systems, MRI systems. And there's things like the Genting Dream, which was built with one on board. And for some reason, it has become the go-to thing recently for cruise ships to advertise themselves that they have MRIs aboard as part of their medical systems.
Because
I can tell you why that is. Cruise ships, yes. I'm sorry. I was thinking warships.
Yeah.
No, cruise ships. It's so that you can thrombolize people if they have a stroke.
Yeah.
That's why you'll have an MRI scanner. It's so that if somebody, because I mean, the really big cruise ships will have typically quite a few people die on board on each cruise of natural causes, because the population that goes on cruise ships is heavily weighted to the elderly, who often have health problems that mean that they like the idea of going somewhere that is basically a floating hospital, which they kind of are. But that's not going to keep work for all of them. And one of the big things that you may get at sea is whilst you're away from places, is a stroke. And thrombolizing a stroke, I mean, genuinely, it's an injection and then an infusion. I've done it. I can't remember how many times I've thrombolized people for strokes. But you can also thrombolize for heart attacks, and you can thrombolize for PE. So it's all with the same stuff. It's just slightly different dosing and kind of what else you do.
Box out now. I don't want to go on a cruise ship.
Wait, now does this make you the thrombler?
Senecanera, if too many old people die on a cruise ship, an ice cream party takes place. You say that as a bad thing. I go, ice cream party.
The last thing you want at sea for long periods is an incredibly stressed crew.
1961. If the British build a 170-gun 4-deck first-rate ship of the line, what might her arrangement of 32-pounder, 18-pounder, and 20-pounder begun to be? Lower deck 32-pound. Lowest deck will probably get 32-pounders. Next two decks probably variations on the 18-pounders, and upper deck 12-pounders.
Thrombolizing somebody sounds like British slang for beating somebody up.
AC-75. Have naval officers become less aggressive over time? No. But you have to remember that aggression has its place, and they are taught where to put that place. They also... it's a case of you always have to balance what you're doing, and if you're doing it... Remember, I've talked about this before, there was a difference between the destroyer officers and the cruiser officers in their period. Destroyer officers were able to be completely unkempt aggression. The cruiser officers who had to do diplomacy had to keep a very tight control on their aggression. They had it, but they had to keep it under control. That's the difference. Dominic Kuhn, you said in another stream that there is a lot wrong with the F-127 project for the German Navy. Can you explain more? Or point me to another video stream where you explain it. Okay, I have discussed it in a bit of detail in things, but mostly it's coming up in the frigate navy. I've done a lot of research already for a video which is coming up later in this year, because we're doing the destroyer, but I'm going to talk about why there are certain frigate navies. And with the F-127, how do I put this politely? I think I did something in... There was quite a long discussion, if I remember correctly, in Bill Trumps. There was good stuff. There is good stuff in the F-127s, but there's also
not so good.
Yeah, it's basically one of those things of they're going for quite a large, quite a capable ship. But it's also a case of what they're expecting from the ship, etc. They want a 100 kilowatt laser for direct energy weapons. They want a 5-inch gun. They want some 30 millimeters. They want various helicopters. They're talking about a 12,000 ton ship or a Miko A400. And yeah, we'll see what actually happens, because one of the things I'm worried at the moment is that they are expecting rather a lot from that ship. If I explain, give you a short précis of what I said. They have got a very big requirements from that ship at the moment, and a very high specs. And I'm not sure if the budget and the planning fits the specs they're going for. But we'll see what happens. Stafford, stop trying to time out Seneca Nero.
As we all know, the polite thing to do is merely to ban him.
Again, this is the reason. Do not make me call your counterpart. There are two counterparts to you. Runon is not reliable when it comes to disciplining you, Dan. But we do have one who is reliable. I will call her.
Anybody who would like to get a mild chuckle. You may potentially desire to inspect a certain MD's roles in the Discord server at your convenience. Has somebody answered Matt Left's 94th question over on Twitch? Because if not, I can do that.
Yes. Cleaning the freezers. Yes, basically. Ice cream partner is definitely cleaning freezers. Definitely.
If you're asking why one would clear the freezer, it is so that you have cold storage for the cadaver.
Yeah. Because you're not allowed to
Because
bury out sea these
apparently-
days.
Yeah.
Because Knight, come on, man, you know this. Banning Seneca randomly without reason or warning is a favored pastime of this channel.
To be fair, that was one of the reasons why Seneca did. Seneca earned it in many other ways, but that was also one of the reasons why I gave Seneca a mod status, so he stopped being randomly banned, randomly muted.
I think Nightbot banned him, what, 3 times? 4 times?
Well, at one point in one stream, Nightbot banned him 4 times, Dan banned him 4 times, and Stafford also did twice. And I think a couple of others did as well.
I'm still not certain that at least a couple of those were not necessarily malice aforethought, but of questionable impartiality.
They were done as a bit of a wind-up. As Steve says, only for amusement. The fact is that they all got on and all were chatting with each other beforehand, so doing this was their idea of a joke, and it was my idea of, I'm not letting this carry on, so I modded Seneca, so Seneca wouldn't have it happen again. Zach Headley, what is the panel's favourite battle from all the ages of ship design? My favourite battle. Oh, I'd probably go for Narvik for its sheer brawlingness. I like Narvik. I'd also say there's a few battles in the fjords which I quite like for similar reasons. In the what's it called? The Anglo-Swedish? Is it the the Baltic conflict, which the British fought in the Age of Sail against the Dano-Norwegians, and had fun with them. Everyone else in the panel?
Was that? Oh, sorry.
Didn't do my answer, but go on then.
I was just wondering, is that the war where Britain kind of was at war with Sweden, but all we did was set up base on an island near one of their places, started growing food, and then just traded with the locals?
No, we technically were allied to Sweden at that point. It was during the Napoleonic Wars. At one point, Norway, Denmark, just be Norway, Denmark. I think it's after the second Copenhagening.
Sorry.
I'm just trying to think. Favorite naval battle of all time was the question, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Do I go for the joke answer or the real answer?
Why not both?
Okay, first one is the 1989 Translunar Engagement.
Go on.
Hey, I'm going to need that one explained, please.
Yeah,
Preferably with small words.
it was a short-lived conflict where both the NASA and the Soviet Space Agency utilizing shuttles and missiles for a war